this meeting to order. Again, good evening and welcome to the June 14th, 2022 meeting of the Joint Committees of Dover and Sherborn. My name is Interim Superintendent Kathleen Smith, and I call this meeting to order at 6:35 p.m. We're pleased to hold this open meeting in person at Dover-Sherborn Middle School, and we are also live streaming with DSC TV for those who wish to view remotely. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. So I'd like to open up with what we call our reorganization. And we do have our three committees here this evening. And we are going to elect our chair and I believe secretary for our joint committees. There is a policy that talks about the Dover-Sherborn Union 50 Superintendency Committee. It shall consist of 6 members, 3 from each of the constituent committees. And we have a process by which we go back and forth each year. Last year, the chair was from Sherborn. It was Nancy Cordell, who did an excellent job. Thank you to Nancy, who has stepped off of the Sherborn School Committee at this time. So this year, the chair will be from Dover. So I would like to open it up for nominations.
I would like to nominate Sarah Gutierrez-Dunn.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have to understand here, I think.
Probably should be from Union.
Right. So from Union 50, we have 3 senior members from Dover and 3 senior members from Sherborn. So our 3 senior members from Dover are Sarah Gutierrez-Dunn, Elizabeth Grossman, and Colleen Burt. And from Sherborn, it is Amanda Brown, Dennis Quant, and Sangeeta Rousseau, who are joining us via Zoom this evening, which right now is allowed by law in the Commonwealth to have this hybrid type meeting. So again, let me ask for nominations. Do I have a nomination for chair?
Amanda Brown, I'll nominate Sarah Gutierrez-Dunn.
Do I have a second?
Can I second it? No.
We need somebody from Union 50, so.
So that's me, right?
Yes.
No. So we would need Colleen. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Liz. All right. So now Union 50 folks can vote.
Correct. Okay, so I'm going to, because again, we have the hybrid model, let me call for that vote. Sarah Gutierrez-Dunn,
Yes.
Elizabeth Grossman,
Yes.
Colleen Burt,
Colleen Burt, yes.
Amanda Brown,
Amanda Brown, yes.
Dennis Quant,
Dennis Quant, yes.
and Sangeeta Rousseau.
Edith Russo, yes.
Okay, congratulations to Sarah for being our chair going forward. Now, I do have to ask, do other members vote after that happens, or there is not? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is just for Union 50.
Okay.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, and I'm
And
going to hand
so-
that over to you, Madam
Yes.
Chair.
So the next order of business would be electing a secretary for Union 50, and I would like to nominate Amanda Brown. Is there a second?
Ms. Grossman, second.
Thank you, Liz.
Payback.
Any discussion? All right. So we'll do another roll call vote. Liz?
Ms. Grossman, yes.
Amanda?
Amanda Brown, yes.
Sarah Gutierrez-Dunn, yes. And Colleen?
Colleen Burt, yes.
Dennis?
Dennis Quant, yes.
And Geeta?
Edith Russo, yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Amanda, for your willingness to serve in that role.
Thank you.
All right. So that is our Union 50 reorganization. We shall move on in our agenda to community comments. We have provided a Zoom link for anyone who wishes to make a community comment, but for whom it is not possible or preferred to attend in person this evening. And so before I read the preamble, is there anyone either here with us or on the Zoom who would like to make a community comment this evening? Please just raise your hand if so. Yes, please. I'm going to read our sort of ground rules for community comments before we have you speak, if you don't mind. So please remember that community comments are an opportunity for members of the school committees to listen to members of the community. It is not a forum for answering questions or engaging in a debate. We respectfully request that you please make your comments brief, no more than 3 minutes, and that you move the discussion forward by adding new information. Please try to avoid repeating points that have already been made. And once the public comment section of the meeting has been concluded, we will move on to other business, and unsolicited comments from the community will no longer be permitted. This is standard operating procedure in school committee meetings across our 3 school districts. And in case it hasn't been mentioned already, we are recording this meeting in addition to live streaming with DSC TV. So please, feel free.
I'm Liza Birmingham. I'm president of the senior class, and I live at 380 Main Street in Dover.
I'm Henry Murphy. I'm president of the Dover-Sherborn student council, and I live at 1 Cider Hill.
Great. Welcome. Please speak up, please.
So the senior class has a significant amount of excess funds, and we can use these funds to purchase a senior gift. When considering what this gift should be, it was obvious to all of us that this money must go towards something positive and meaningful for the school in memory of our friend Owen Bingham. Everyone who knew Owen knew that he loved a good weight room. Many of his closest friends have reached out about renovating the weight room here at Dover-Sherborn and dedicating the space to Owen. Mrs. Bingham agrees that this would be the perfect way to honor his legacy at DS. We are prepared to use $6,000 to $9,000 and potentially more through fundraising to improve the weight room through new equipment and purchasing a plaque for the entranceway. This dedication has the full support of the Bingham family, and the members of the student council are more than willing to execute the project. Not only would this senior gift bring needed updates to the out-of-date weight room, but it would be a nice way to honor Owen, who did so much for the school and the community at large. We would love to get started on this as soon as possible, and we ask you to consider supporting this request. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Are there other community comments? Anyone on the Zoom?
Anyone on Zoom? Nope.
All right. Then we will move on to our agenda, and that closes the community comments portion of this meeting. Next up, and we are going to be hearing, I think, a presentation, a video presentation, is that right,
Yes.
Beth, from our 3rd graders concerning Columbus Day and Indigenous Persons Day.
The host has disabled sharing screens. And I am not the host. I don't know.
Beth, are we able to just project it
I can
onto
just
the
project it, and
onto
then
the screen,
people-
and I think that the live stream at least will
Okay.
capture it.
All right, before we introduce the 3rd grade presentation, I would like to take a moment to recognize some special guests in our audience. It has been a very exciting year of hiring, very busy spring, and we have 2 members of our leadership team who are joining us this evening. Mr. Denny Conklin is our new assistant superintendent coming to us from Arlington, and Mr. David Lawrence is our new middle school principal joining us from Acton Boxborough. So welcome both, and thank you for being here this evening so that you can continue to learn all about DS and be ready to hit the ground running on July 1st. So that said, our 3rd grade students came forth with a request to the 3 school committees to consider changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. So I have a video presentation, and then there'll be time for discussion at the end.
Hi, Dover-Sherborn School Committee. Thank you so much for giving us the time to share with you today. I know how busy you are. I am Jen Ryan, for those of you who don't know me. I am the literacy coach at Pine Hill School in Sherborn. I've been teaching at the elementary school for 15 years now, and absolutely love getting to work with all of our K-5 students. So one of the things that we know is true and really value in Dover-Sherborn is that learning is most powerful when it is grounded in what is real, what is authentic, and what is purposeful. So we are here tonight to share with you one cause that is near to many of our third graders' hearts. And it's one way that they intend to, in fact, change the world. So our third graders, in their social studies frameworks, learn about the impact of European exploration, migration, and colonization on the indigenous populations of North America. Our social studies standards are grounded in themes of social justice. They learn about things like territory loss, the spread of diseases, religious conversion, population loss, and more. And in doing this, they study this in a lot of ways. One of those ways is by studying primary source documents, like journals. And through this, they read accounts of things like the weaponization of disease and many other things. This social studies frameworks work in a lovely way with our literacy frameworks. Some of the books that our students have shared and read in third grade include some powerful nonfiction text like History Smashers, Plagues and Pandemics by Kate Messner, which outlines sort of the historical spread of disease, including in our own country with the spread of smallpox, and also realistic fiction and fictional text. This book on the right is a lovely new release called Res Dogs by Joseph Bruckach that takes place in modern times on an Abenaki reservation during our pandemic. As you know, we use the units of study for reading and writing, and one of our favorite writing units of study is our opinion unit. It's all about changing the world. And through this unit of study, students learn how to affect change through written communication. And they self-identify things that really matter to them, things that they want to see changed in their home, then at their school. And then the final bend of this unit is about identifying needs for change in their world or their larger community. And this is where our project comes in. This year, we decided to focus this third bend around our larger school community, and we took an inquiry stance where we asked students to take a look at our school calendar, just look at our school calendar. And they examined it through the lens of what a school calendar says about a community's values. And they were really excited looking at our calendar because they noticed things like we celebrate a lot of different religious holidays. This must mean we care about all of the people in our community. They noticed that we now celebrate Juneteenth. And they were so excited to learn that the date that celebrates the abolition of slavery is so important in our community. And then they had a question. They thought that the celebration of Columbus Day, many students thought that this contradicted what the rest of the calendar showed that it valued. They asked, how come we celebrate Juneteenth that commemorates the end of slavery, but we still celebrate Columbus Day, celebrating a man who caused slavery of Indigenous people? They thought this was contradictory. So some students asked what they could do about this. Many felt that they really wanted to see the end of our celebration of Columbus. So they asked, how can we make this change happen? So we talked about how When many people have a strong idea and they can support it with lots of evidence, they can present it to school committee, and school committee, if they agree, can make a motion to change the policy. They can vote and then take action. We also discussed that we don't all feel the same way and we can hold different opinions. Some of our students felt strongly that Columbus Day should be changed to Indigenous Peoples Day to honor the millions of Indigenous people who lost their lives. Others felt strongly that Columbus Day was important and should remain unchanged. And others still felt like Columbus Day should simply be deleted from the calendar. At Pine Hill School and all of our schools in Dover-Sherborn, we believe strongly that school must be a place that promotes safe space for diverse opinions and dialogue. We've been working on these skills since the very beginning of the year through our responsive classroom communication and morning meetings. We teach concretely how to have accountable talk. We use sentence stems that promote respect, like, I hear what you're saying, I value your opinion, I disagree because, or I agree because, and all of these conversational dialogue skills are practiced every single day. And this happened during this unit. We had children of all opinions, and they all felt comfortable to share and write based on their own belief set. So our third graders have written letters to the school committee with the hopes of changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. They've sent their letters in to you for you to review, and I'd like to take a moment now to introduce just some of our third graders who are willing to be filmed to present their strong feelings and their hopes in changing their world and making their world a better place. So I hope you enjoy listening to these third graders, and thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Dear Dover-Sherborn School Committee members, hello, my name is Mason Schaefers, and I'm in third grade in the Simmons Room. It has come to my attention that something on the calendar is wrong, and that thing is Columbus Day. We should change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. One reason is that Columbus enslaved thousand Indigenous Peoples Day. For example, he took the natives by saying, "Come on in my ship, we will get protection," but actually he enslaved them. Another reason is that the native people already had thriving communities. And then Columbus came, and then he gave smallpox and violence, and his total death toll is 55 million people. A final reason that we must take a day to honor the native peoples who lost their lives. I hope it comes to your attention to please consider this change. Sincerely, Grayson Schaefers. Thank you.
Dear Dover-Sherborn School Committee members, my name is Damian Gorохowski, and I am a student at Pine Hill Elementary School. I am in third grade, and my teacher is Miss Simon. I am here to tell all of you to change Columbus Day into Indigenous Peoples Day. My first reason is that Indigenous people were there first and claimed it first, but Columbus took it over. For example, when Columbus landed in the Bahamas, Columbus just said, "This land is mine." So this shows that Indigenous people was there first, and that's one reason to change Columbus Day. My second reason is that Columbus just made lives worse. For example, Columbus was killing people that made the Indigenous' lives worse. This shows that Columbus just made lives worse, and that's my second reason. My final reason is that Columbus used smallpox as a weapon to kill Indigenous people. Like, for example, Columbus gave blankets with smallpox This shows that Columbus used smallpox as a weapon. In conclusion, thank you for listening about why we should change Columbus Day into Indigenous Peoples Day. Sincerely, Damien Gorохowski. Sherborn School Committee members. The Dover-Sherborn Public Schools should change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day because Columbus was selfish, unfair, and greedy. And the Indigenous peoples should be recognized. First, Indigenous people have made discoveries that are now huge parts of the United States culture. Some of the things that the Indigenous people in the Americas invented or discovered are rubber, chocolate, medicine, canoeing, lacrosse, tobogganing, snowshoeing, and tug-of-wars. Life would be different if it weren't for the Indigenous people. Second, Columbus enslaved many of the Indigenous people and made them come back to Spain and work as enslaved people. The Indigenous people who went back to Spain didn't get to wear the clothes that they would normally wear, speak the language that they normally spoke, or do a lot of things that they did back at home. Columbus also became in charge of one of the Caribbean islands and made the people there work as enslaved people too. Last, Columbus wasn't the one who discovered America. The Indigenous people were. A long time ago, when Russia and Alaska were connected, the Indigenous people came from Asia to America and stayed there. In addition, Columbus wasn't even the first European to come to America. Leif Erikson was. In conclusion, the Dover-Sherborn Public Schools should change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day because the Indigenous people have made discoveries and inventions that many people now use or do a lot. Some of the Indigenous people were enslaved, and Columbus wasn't even the first person to discover America. He wasn't even the first European to discover it. Thank you for considering this idea. Please change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. Sincerely, and I'll be done here.
Dear School Committee members of Dover-Sherborn, hello, my name is Susanna Brown and I am a student in Miss Simmons' 3rd grade class at Pine Hill. I feel very strongly about changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day officially on the school calendar. Do you think you could consider voting to change it? It would be an honor. Here are my reasons. One reason is Columbus chose wealth and power over people, which is not okay at all. For example, he wanted all the power that everyone else had, so he hurt them so he could get it all. But that is not a way to get power. You would get blamed instead of fame. Another reason is he tricked the Indigenous peoples with blankets that had smallpox germs in them. For instance, he acted like he was being nice and giving them something to keep warm, but he was actually giving them something to die from on purpose. My last reason is he killed many people for land, which is not okay at all. Those are my reasons. Indigenous people should be honored and celebrated for being so brave for those weeks. If it's going to stay Columbus Day, don't have a holiday for those people at all. Thank you, from Susanna Brown. Dear Sherborn School Committee members, I'm Ivan Lee and I'm in 3rd grade, and it comes to my attention that we should change Columbus Day into Indigenous Peoples Day. One reason is that he stole people and land, for example. I read a book and it said that he made the Native Americans get on the ship and lock them up, all without telling them what was even going on. Another reason is that they threw him a feast, but instead of thanking them, he killed and enslaved them. So why celebrate such a greedy man? Another reason is that while slaves, the Native Americans did free labor, and even after slavery, the former slaves did not get anything, even though they were held as slaves. In conclusion, please consider changing Columbus Day into Indigenous Peoples Day. Thanks. Sincerely, Ivan.
Dear Sherborn School Committee members, the Dover-Sherborn Public Schools should not let Columbus Day be celebrated. First, Columbus enslaved many of the Indigenous peoples and even killed them. Originally, some 300,000 native islanders lived on Hispaniola by
1548, about 50 years later, less than 500 Tianos remained. As a result, Columbus Day should not be celebrated. Second, indigenous peoples discovered the New World, not Columbus. The New World wasn't even lost and did not need to be discovered. Finally, the world would be so much harder if the indigenous peoples did not discover medicine that comes from plants. Also, indigenous peoples discovered how to use plants to make chocolate and rubber. Imagine a world without football or basketball because there is no rubber. In conclusion, Columbus Day should not be celebrated because of how badly Columbus treated the indigenous peoples. However, indigenous peoples should be celebrated because they have done many helpful things such as making basketball and football possible. Remove Columbus Day from the school calendar and replace it with Indigenous Peoples Day. Thank you for considering my idea.
All right, so that is from our third grade friends, many of whom are watching live stream, so they're listening and watching to make sure you're paying attention. But just to give you a little bit of background on Columbus Day, so as we know, Columbus landed in the Americas in 1492 after he sailed the ocean blue. In 1892, Discovery Day was first celebrated as he was recognized as a pioneer of progress and enlightenment. And at that point in time, I believe it was President Harrison who was trying to pay reparations to the Italian immigrants who were being treated so unfairly and being lynched. So he named the day after somebody from their Italian nation, who would be Christopher Columbus. In 1934, Congress designated Columbus Day as a national holiday. From the 1960s all the way through today, there are several calls by Native Americans to rename the day as reparation for the pain and suffering of their ancestors done by Columbus upon his arrival. In 2021, President Biden was the first to say we are going to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day on the same day as Columbus Day. So it's that second Monday in October. And it's in honor of our diverse history and Indigenous peoples who contribute to shaping this nation, as you heard from our kiddos, around medicine and football and rubber. Right now, there are several bills sitting in front of the Massachusetts legislature in support of Native American people. One would be honoring the day officially on the state calendar. Another is about protecting Native American heritage and the items that are in museums to make sure that they're not sold for money. Removing Native American mascots, which we know is a trend across many schools and continues. Making sure that we celebrate and teach Native American culture and history in our classrooms. And making sure that we're providing all the necessary supports for Native and Indigenous children to be able to access a rich curriculum wherever it is that they're learning. So it's a little bit of history of Columbus Day. And there is a movement across the entire country, but specifically in Massachusetts. There are school districts who have moved on their own to rename the holiday on their calendars, separate from their towns, and then there are several communities where it's happened both at the town level and within the schools. And this list is not comprehensive because these votes continue to be taken, week after week, and there's not one place to compile this information, but it's a start. So I leave it to you for your consideration and discussion at this point. I'm happy to take any questions that you have, although I'm not an expert in this, and I would have to call my third grade friends probably to get the answers. So.
Well, thank you, Beth, and thank you to the Pine Hill third graders. I found your arguments very compelling. You gathered a significant amount of evidence, and I'm so impressed that you were able to have this discussion in your classrooms, that you were able to have a debate perhaps in a respectful way. And we, as a school committee, I'm sure appreciate your bringing this to us. So I open it to school committee members with comments and questions. Colleen?
I would just like to say thank you to the students
who spoke and for the others that sent their letters in that we were able to read. I was very impressed by their writing skills, so kudos to the teachers as well. And I wanted to just say that I appreciated that all the arguments were presented for, against, and neutral. And I really did appreciate arguments for Indigenous Peoples Day, not only as a retraction of the Columbus Day, but also honoring, not just honoring, but celebrating Indigenous peoples, which does go along with our curriculum very well. Mm-hmm. So very, very pleased that they brought this to us. Mm-hmm. Others?
I'd say thank you as well, and I think it was helpful to hear the background that this began, as an inquiry look at the calendar and considering the values we hold, as well as the evidence laid in front of us, and working with that to figure out how do we move forward and what kind of decision would we make as an individual or as a community.
Kate?
I just want to thank the third graders as well and their teachers for bringing this to us. I agree with Colleen. I love that respectful dialogue was used on all sides. I enjoyed reading the letters. I know Beth shared some with us earlier, some that weren't in the presentation. And I'm curious from just a process question, because we're not voting tonight. What happens next after we discuss this would be put on a future agenda?
I think so. I think the idea would be that we would need to convene ideally in the fall, early in the fall, before Columbus Day, if this is something that the school committee would like to act upon, in order to take that vote.
Yeah, I found the third graders' arguments really persuasive, and I'm a lawyer, and I thought they were honestly really terrific. I thought it was very insightful. I thought this was just a marvelous project, and I would be very much in favor of changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, and I'd love to see that on the agenda in the fall.
Others? All right. Well, again, thank you to our Pine Hill third graders and their teachers for bringing this issue to our attention, and it sounds like it's something that we will need to take up first thing in the fall.
Great.
Thank you. Next up, and we are going to deviate slightly from the order on our agenda, just because we have several presentations that we have guests that have been invited to, and in the interest of sort of moving through efficiently. So next up is going to be the preliminary findings of our equity audit. And Beth, I'm guessing that we're going to be hearing from our friends at NYU.
Yes. So, Sarah, is that you sharing your screen?
I have not tried to share my screen yet, but I will right now.
Okay. Or I can. Can you see my screen?
I can, yes.
Do you want to actually share yours so you can control it?
No, that's all right. I think it's fine how you have it if you can click through for us.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce Sarah Mcallister, who you've met a number of times this year. She is our program coordinator from New York University. She is joined tonight by her colleagues from NYU, who are also on Zoom, and I'll let Sarah introduce them, as well as the advisory board members, who are Dover-Sherborn students, educators, parents, and community members who have been supporting this project from start until now. Some of them are here on Zoom, and you'll hear their voices. Some of them are here in the audience, and you'll hear from them too. So Sarah, take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us again this evening. These amazing third graders are going to be a very tough act to follow, but we'll do our best. We're very pleased to be able to share some emerging findings from our work so far, and to preview our full report, which will be coming this fall. Our goals have been to understand how students, families, educators, school staff, and school and district leaders experience Dover-Sherborn Public Schools, and to understand their perspectives on how the school system is ensuring that everyone gets what they need to be seen and valued and to thrive and grow. Where we do observe inequities and gaps, we try to understand what practices, beliefs, and policies create or sustain those gaps. And we always at the NYU Metro Center strive for our research to be relevant and useful. And so we hope to develop a set of actionable, feasible, and sustainable recommendations that draw on what we've learned from the Dover-Sherborn context. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Our guiding principle for this equity audit is that belonging is central to learning. Feeling psychologically safe, seen, known, valued, and affirmed is not a luxury, but rather a precondition for learning and growing. When schools pay attention to differences and work to provide equitable opportunities and universal inclusion, they work better for everyone, including the students who are already being well served. We really deeply appreciate the time and energy and transparency and thoughtfulness that so many community members have invested in this audit to ensure that we're asking the right questions and that we're developing findings and recommendations that make sense for this community. Go to the next slide. So we've shared this data before, so I'll just be very brief. That I'll just remind you that that our data collection has been pretty extensive. We've collected 1,768 survey responses with demographics that very closely match the district demographics and with very rich open-ended response data. We've also conducted extensive focus groups and interviews with students, parents, educators, and school leaders from Dover, Sherborn, and Boston who are diverse by race, gender, home language, religion, sexual orientation, and disability status. We'll go to the next slide. Tonight we're going to share 5 key findings. I won't read them right now, but we're going to touch on each of these briefly. And I'm very pleased to have 3 advisory board members with us tonight to help present these findings. We have Caleb Dolan, a Pine Hill and middle school parent, Douglas Welch, a 9th grade student, and Jennifer Valenzuela, a middle school parent, who will each present the data supporting one of these findings. And then we'll say a little bit about next steps and welcome your questions. So to share our first finding, I will turn it over to Caleb now.
Do you want me to stand? What is the protocol here? Oh, really? Okay, great. Hi, I'm Caleb. My daughter, Tallulah, is a 6th grader at the middle school, and my daughter, Mavis, is a kindergartner. And my wife, Joanna, is home with both of them right now, but supporting us in spirit. And I also, in addition to shouting out the 3rd graders, I'll just say that being on DSA and this group, the work with the students and alumni of this district has been the most impactful experience for me so far in this school system as a recent newcomer. The students and alumni just speak with a ton of urgency about and belief that we can do better. And that's been inspiring for me. You get to hear from one of them in just a minute. No pressure. First finding is that large majorities of Dover-Sherborn school community members agree this is time for bold, consequential action for equity. This may not reflect the reality of some of your inboxes or angry social media posts, but much like our country, the majority of people want to do better. And what we heard from this majority of parents, and I'll just maybe translate that slide, they want morally courageous action. When they say bold, they do not want us to follow other districts or look left and look right. They want us to be morally courageous. They want us to take action for equity that provides material changes in the experiences of students and families, so that we look 3-4 years from now, and it is different if you are a Black student in Dover-Sherborn. It is different if you're a transgender student in Dover-Sherborn. It is different if you're a Latino family moving to the community. And that's what they've called you as leaders to do. But it's also in these interviews, we hear a collective urgency. This is all our work. While we're calling on you to do it, we really do believe in communal and collective responsibility for this. Next slide, Sarah. Part of this large majority's belief that now is the time is that we've actually had real progress. There's been bold moves like Challenge Success to separate our. Oh, hi. My daughter's best friend's mom. She can give it all the dirt. They realized that something like Challenge Success says we don't have to be the standard, suburban district that only cares about college admissions. We can do more. We can be different and bold. They've seen progress in their students' classrooms. They've seen individual teachers make real moves on culturally responsive pedagogy. And they believe that could happen in every classroom, every grade, every day, every year. And they've seen the places where the students experience affinity groups, speaking for my eldest, like the Gender and Sexuality Alliance has been a safe haven for her and a really powerful introduction to the middle school. And so, they've seen what those places can do. So progress has driven this, the time is now, but there's also, next slide, please. It's like you show the bar graph and everybody's just like, but I'll summarize. People realize there is a majority of people recognize that most students the school system works for. There is a large portion of us who believe that not all students have an equitable experience. Now there are, as you dig into this data, and Sarah can talk to it in much more depth and thoughtfulness, but there are disproportionalities in how Black families feel about the district, in how students with special needs or other groups of students and families feel. But what I hope you take away from this slide is that even in a district where the majority of kids are white and affluent, all parents think we can do better and believe that they actually want to see equity for all, and they don't think equity translates to less for some. That this really is an opportunity for more for all. Next slide. Sarah, am I doing okay with time? Okay, talking fast. So there is, in addition to that kind of belief that we've made real progress in this district, there is a real drive for urgent action. Not years, not 3 more years of our committee looking at data. And these are grounded in things that probably seem like common sense, but these were highlighted across interviews across all stakeholder groups. Diversifying our school faculty and district leadership, and seriously, people tell you it's too hard. Sorry, this is from my own professional experience. It's not. It's doable. It's entirely doable. Because students need to see representations of their own identity, and all organizations are better when they're diverse. They make smarter decisions, they're stronger organizations. They want to see a comprehensive approach to culturally responsive curriculum development. That's a little bit of ed lingo, but if folks are unsure about it, please ask. They want to take what great teachers are already doing and expand it to all students' experiences. I do really want to call your attention to the third bullet because it's probably the most challenging and will require the most courage. And that's that there is a lot, when you talk to our students, a lot of hate speech and bias and exclusion, whether online, in the hallways. It happens quite frequently. And they want reckoning with it. And they don't want it to just be about punishment, but about how do we really reckon with these things and move forward in a way that repairs harm. And finally, they want to be involved. They want to have these conversations happen across the community. So those are some of the actions that we have a strong appetite for. I think I'm about to hand it off to Doug. Ready?
Yep.
All right. Woo.
Okay. Thank you all for having me here today. So as you can see up here, I would say that the second point here is that not everyone is fully supported to grow and thrive in DS schools, despite important signs of change. School culture still center predominantly white, Christian, neurotypical, affluent, academically and athletically successful students. And next slide, please. So this is the bar graph chart to, are there spaces you feel you belong within Dover-Sherborn Public Schools? And I would say that these are broadly encouraging statistics, though I would note that there is still a significant number of people that say no, especially in parents. And I have an idea, or a postulation of why that is. In the next slide, if I could have that, please, thank you. So I would like to mention some sites of belonging. For students, that is sports, drama, music, clubs, and for example, the GSA is a great one. Classrooms, teachers, counselors, the IEP room, GRIT, learning center, peer connections, and the Medco lounge. And then for families, there is school events, sports performances, parent organizations, and volunteer opportunities. So I would note, unlike in the student section, there is not, and this is just my own observation, perhaps why the statistics are a bit lower for parents is because there's no designated group for parents of marginalized groups. Just an idea. Next slide. Thank you. So I can, in terms of all these preceding bullet points, I can attest to all of these. So many parents, students, and educators described a narrow box for successful students. The second one, affluence and Christianity, are often taken as a given by educators and fellow students. I'd give, like, I guess for context, I would say that often we read books, and often it'll be from, like, say, you know, if it's about somewhere that's in the imperial periphery, it'll be about a colonized person, but we will look at it from the perspective of a colonizer when it's not meant to be interpreted that way. Students of color, religious minority students, neurodiverse students, and LGBTQIA students reported social exclusion and a feeling of invisibility or otherness. I can also, this one especially, I have friends that are queer and trans, and they experience this on a daily basis. It's pretty disheartening. Students often have to push to have their needs acknowledged and met. This is also true. Often, like, we see, like, perhaps say there's an interaction between two students. A teacher will treat the perpetrator and the victim as, like, sort of like a both sides sort of thing, I would say, as an example. And then barriers to participation for single parents, dual earner families, families in Boston, and lower income families. I think that the geographical difference between Boston and DS often leads to a sort of isolated feeling of community as well. If I could have the next slide, please. Signs of progress. So efforts to recalibrate academic pressure and broaden notions of success and support, SEL, challenge success, ERT, bridge, organization station. Growing diversity in school library collections, class materials, music selections, and visual displays. I've seen this personally. I remember last year in music class, we would, like, learn about, like, music from Mongolia and things like that, things that are non-Western. Increasing sensitivity on the part of staff and faculty in considering family structures, holidays, and traditions. This is often, there aren't many holidays around right now, but it's more clear in the fall and winter and things like that. And then efforts to open conversations about historical events and issues like appropriation. And that's the end of my section. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Jen, we can't hear you.
Jen is going to be on Zoom.
There, here we go. Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I was double muted. Hi, everyone. You can shift your eyes this way now to the screen, I think. So thanks, Doug. Thanks, Caleb. I'm Jennifer Valenzuela. I am a parent of a 7th grader at the middle school. He is in the METCO program, and so I do feel the realities of not being able, I did drive out there for an hour and a half drive to be there for just like 15, 20 minutes. Felt like it wasn't a good use of my time. And so this type of opportunity to be virtual makes it so that METCO families that aren't living right there in the neighborhood can be involved in the school events that are happening. So the third emerging finding that we're finding is that many of our students are experiencing being othered, whether it's from racism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, religious bias, and others. And so we'll go a little bit more into what we heard from them. So next slide. So out of a 5-point scale, we did see our students had some pretty high scores, so almost 4, 3.94. Keep in mind, like, this is not like what Caleb had said earlier. We have not broken this down even further so that you can see what the numbers look like when you start looking at our Black students, our any of our BIPOC students, any of our kids that might be on the LGBTQIA spectrum. And so just keep that in mind while you're looking at this. And we are, as we go on, we are going to be able to see more of those disparities and really be able to understand, like, what the inside scoop is on those numbers. Next slide. So what you see in the certain amount that we have been able to go deeper into this data, when I looked at this, what I saw is that the experience for our students is inconsistent. And what I mean by that is that some say they don't experience bias, some say they do experience bias, and that bias is coming from peers, it's coming from educators, it's coming from other adults, but the people who responded had different answers for that. Something I think that's really important to highlight is number 3 on this slide. So when adults are inconsistent, and at times they don't intervene when incidents occur, that really leads to this unsafe environment for some of our students. So something I'm really hoping we can work on in the coming years is that for our students to have a consistent, always feeling safe, and knowing, like being really confident that the adults around them are going to be there for them in their responses, and they're going to be consistent on if and when there are any forms of bias, forms of racism, or any other aggression, that they are supporting them and they're there for them and protecting them, really. Next slide. So staying on the theme that many students and families experience different forms of exclusion, forms of bias and harassment. We've heard repeated stories of students being confused if they were to share a racial or ethnic background. I can tell you as someone that's experienced that for much of my life, I understand that I get that at times you can be confused, and it's not the beginning of the school year when maybe you can't remember somebody's name or when you're first meeting a family. It's the repeated offenses and that disinterest that seems to be there of actually taking the time, the effort, the energy to actually learn somebody's name and identifying them as an individual. People, and it really hurts, and we really saw that in the responses. And then again, the last line I think is really important on this slide as well that I want to highlight. So our educators just don't feel prepared to intervene. They're concerned about parent responses, and that's also impacting what and if they do anything. So I'm excited to see what's possible and how the adults in the schools can start feeling better prepared. I know that they have the backing of the administrators and also the school committees for when we go forward so that they can feel confident and going in and intervening when it's necessary and really keeping our students emotionally safe.
Jen, Douglas, and Caleb, thank you so much. I'm going to share the last 2 sets of findings and then talk a little bit about our next steps. Nearly everyone we spoke with suggested that discipline is an area where different approaches are really needed, and in particular, a lot of school community members were dissatisfied with the ways that the kinds of bias incidents that Jen just described are handled. We can go to the next slide. This isn't at all surprising because addressing bias and harassment requires a really difficult balancing act. On the one hand, schools have a strong obligation to protect the privacy of minor students, of course, and schools should approach discipline in a way that prioritizes opportunities for growth and learning over punishment. At the same time, though, these are serious incidents that cause ruptures in the school community, not just harm to the students who are most directly involved. So the response from schools and districts should be commensurate with the harm that's caused and should communicate the seriousness of that harm, right, and take seriously the ways that students beyond just those directly involved might be harmed. We can go to the next slide. We heard from school and district leaders that it's often quite difficult and time-consuming to document and investigate the majority of incidents that happen on buses, sports fields, in the lunchroom, over social media outside of adult supervision. While they recognize the desire from students and families and other educators to know that incidents are being addressed and taken seriously, they share a really fierce commitment to student privacy and to making sure that there are opportunities for growth. From the perspective of students and families, though, it can sometimes seem that school leaders are sweeping issues under the rug or prioritizing the academic and athletic opportunities of those who perpetuate bias over the needs of the students who are harmed. Families and students shared with us that communication about hate speech and other bias incidents sometimes comes across as calls for immunity or for moving on, that those communications don't always reckon directly with the seriousness of the incidents and the seriousness of the harm that's been committed. And they sometimes seem to prioritize sort of the comfort of white families over the needs of families of color or other families who are marginalized. We can go to the next slide. This year, the guidance staff and school leaders have been piloting a new restorative justice approach, which supports students to communicate openly about harm that's been caused and find ways to repair that harm. There's very strong research support for well-designed and well-implemented restorative justice models, but careful design and implementation are imperative and happen over the course of years. So we see a really urgent need for open, transparent, vulnerable conversations, not just inside of schools, but with families and community stakeholders about values, needs, and trust in order to move forward with restorative justice. There's space for more transparency about the goals and procedures of intervention in bias incidents without violating the privacy of specific students. We also think there's a parallel conversation to be had around the gaps between sort of the formal definitions of bullying and school leaders' legal obligations around bullying on the one hand and the perceptions and experiences of students and families on the other. And we can go to the next slide. So we heard a really strong commitment on the part of educators across the district and all 4 schools to taking this work seriously, to developing and implementing culturally responsive practices, using diverse materials, and really making sure that every student is seen and valued and affirmed for who they are. But particularly, you know, at the end of over 2 years of pandemic, when, you know, resources and patience and time and energy are spread thin, teachers need a lot of support to get there. We can go to the next slide. So when asked if Dover-Sherborn schools are preparing students to live in a diverse, multicultural world, you'll see sort of a range of responses, but for the most part, you know, there are as many people who say no or I don't know as there are who say yes. And teachers and staff in particular are more critical of students' preparation for a multicultural world. We can go ahead to the next slide. And we see similar responses around culturally responsive and inclusive and respectful curriculum. So, you know, around half of most stakeholders think that the curriculum is respectful, inclusive, and responsive, but there's a lot of room for improvement. We can go to the next slide. We heard consistently that there has been really important and significant progress on culturally responsive practices and on making space for difficult conversations, but that the capacity for those conversations really varies by department and by individual, individual educator. Interestingly, teachers were much more critical of their own capacity than students or parents were of teacher capacity. So you'll see that only 32% of teachers reported that they are prepared to handle equity-related discussions. Teachers and educators really appreciate the professional development that they've received so far that they've had access to, in particular the IDEAS course, but they see a real need for more sustained, embedded, comprehensive professional learning and dedicated time to observe colleagues, collaborate, and test out new practices. We can go to the next slide. So as Jen mentioned, you know, teachers have really different levels of confidence and preparation for facilitating conversations about differences and about social issues, both within the context of their curriculum and as those issues arise in the classroom. They're concerned sometimes about pushback from parents and about, you know, how much support they can anticipate from schools in the face of that pushback. And we heard many examples from teachers, students, school leaders, and parents of how this unevenness and caution can lead to missed opportunities for learning and can allow biased comments to go unchallenged. And we also heard calls from teachers to really prioritize culturally responsive materials and practices across their curriculum, not only in English, social studies, and other humanities departments. And we can go to the next slide. So we heard many different perspectives on what it means to work towards equity and an inclusive school system and what it means to prepare students for a multicultural world. But over and over again, we heard a real hunger for transparent conversations about the ways that the convicts of Dover-Sherborn and Boston both hinder and facilitate progress toward those goals and how families and schools can work together. Particularly in the wake of the pandemic, you know, relationships and trust are really crucial for making space for those vulnerable and brave conversations. So We are working towards a full detailed report, which will be available in September, and we'll come back to share that again. That report will include more complete analysis of our survey data, including demographic differences in response patterns. It will also include an analysis of multiple years of transcript data and disciplinary data with an eye to identifying opportunity and outcome gaps, together with an analysis of key policy documents, including course placement policies and discipline policies. And then we'll use those detailed findings to develop a set of research-backed recommendations that we think make sense in the Dover-Sherborn context and propose some short-term and medium-term and long-term next steps. We will stop there. I want to thank Caleb, Douglas, and Jen again, and the other advisory board members who are here tonight. We can answer any questions that you have. My colleague, Dr. Lizette D'Souza, who's led the quantitative analysis, is also here with us via Zoom. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you to those of you who served on the advisory group and who were here to present to us tonight. A lot to digest. So are there questions or comments from committee members? Liz?
I just wanted to thank all of you for the time and commitment. It is, like you said, really powerful to hear from the community at large and not a minority, a group that speaks up often. And so it's really exciting to be a part of a large community that wants to see change and truly believes we can do better. So thank you all, the committee, for making this happen and for all the work that so many people have done to bring that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Coley?
I also wanted to thank everybody who are working on this important project and topic. And I just have a quick question. So I saw that on the full report, there would be more analysis of policies and procedures. And I wanted to see if there are going to be any looking into our training and policies of bullying that we have in our, like policies about how we are handling bullying, or if we have any training. Is that going to be also part of the report? Is that going to be also looked at or not?
Yes, we do plan to include some of that in the final report.
Yeah, thank you. Because I saw that you mentioned some teachers and staff have, they don't feel comfortable intervening. So I wanted to see if with better policies or training, we can handle that. Thank you.
Just to piggyback on that, from the work that I've done on other diversity, equity, and inclusion boards, I do have to say that the people who are directly involved, and in this case, the teachers, there is a true hunger for sustainable and long-term training. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the yearly training that we all hopefully remember, but it's an ongoing conversation of growth. And I think when we involve parents, students, other leaders in the community, we can have wonderful conversations that really pull the lid back and allow us to do this deeply important work and get our hands dirty. So thank you so much for everyone who has contributed to this. This is so important, and it is so encouraging to see all of this and the work that lies ahead.
Thank you. I see another hand here.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. I wanted to reemphasize, I think, what everyone has said. This has been really, really informative, really a thorough process. And, just thank you very much for the presentations. And I think what really resonated with me, and I think what this committee needs to accept is the challenge to be courageous. Yes. Courage requires a lot of things, and it comes in many different packages and in many different circumstances. It involves being comfortable with conflict. It involves, recognizing one's own limitations. It involves critical thinking when issues are presented. It involves naming the problem. And I think, that's going to be a challenge for us, and I think we need to accept it, and we need to, dive into it, because without the courage to call things out, we're not getting anywhere. I also think that support is essential. Obviously, the educators have expressed the need for support. I think we all need to support one another because this work is hard, and for those people who are willing to step out and who are going to call issues out, they need to feel supported. And they, and support also comes in the form of providing resources, committing to the training, committing to the time that the educators need to, what they said was to learn from one another and collaborate. We need to put our money where our mouths are. And another, there were a number of, I was digging through my Facebook because I found a quote that I thought was really great a while back, and it was something to the effect of, we can't forget, we spend a lot of our times using in our positions focusing on maintaining our positions rather than using our positions. So let's make sure we remember what we're here for and accept the challenge and be courageous and provide the support to the people who need it. To do this work.
And may I just add, in the work that I've seen done at Brigham and Women's Hospital, I work very closely with the physicians and researchers, and specifically OBGYN. And what I've recently learned is a huge barrier that prevents some women from seeking the medical attention, the professional attention that they need, is the fact that there is no one on the staff that looks like them, and they do not trust the people that they see, and there's a history behind all of this. And so really bringing people in and having these safe people to go to that are familiar and look like you and can understand where a student is coming from firsthand is just so important, because I think the principle remains. If a woman is not seeking health care because she does not see herself represented in the professional realm of people who should help, why would a student stay in school? Why would a student raise their hand and ask for assistance if they do not see themselves in the leadership body that is before them?
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, I do want to say one thing, and everything that Lynn said, I think was right on the mark. And one of the things that was the most heartening to me in this report was that our community wants bold change and that we want to be leaders in this area. That a vast majority of our community wants that. And that's really important for us to remember as we move forward. And I think it's what you were talking about, courage. But it's really important to know that our community has our back as we go forward, because this won't be easy work, but it will be hopefully good and eventually rewarding. So thank you.
I'd just like to thank everyone again who contributed to this presentation tonight. I really think this is pointing us towards a restorative justice model for our schools, and I encourage us to consider that sooner rather than later, not wait for September. I think we need to start that process. We need to be dialoguing about what that looks like in our district, because this report is showing how much we have to look at those practices that's coming from the students who are going through this themselves, and it's coming from the report itself as recommendations. So I encourage this committee to take that on seriously.
Just to really quickly piggyback on that, I agree with you that there should be a sense of urgency, because the longer our changes take, the more kids that make it through the system and miss out on that. So I just hope that we can find a way to make our process fairly quick.
Thank you, Liz. Anyone else? Beth or Sarah, did you have anything to?
I just have so I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
This was so great and so much to take in, and I know that we're going to get more in September. And I know there was a lot in our packet, but is there a way to get the slideshow, a copy of that to us? I just feel like I'd love to read it again and think about, you know, ways that we can actually make change, that this group can actually make change, whether it's policy or, you know, being courageous. How can we actually plug that in?
Absolutely. We'll send out all of the slide decks that you'll see tonight, including this one.
Great.
Yeah.
I have a question too. So is this sort of part one of part two? Like, how much does the second phase weigh compared to, like, this was a really thorough, significant report, really on climate, sort of a climate assessment, and, you know, from a real sort of equity perspective, I think it is as important to understand the systemic, you know, the policy, you know, the curriculum. It's, in my mind, it weighs equally, if not more. And so how is that weighted in this sort of process that we're going through?
Mm-hmm. So we do expect to have a lot more to say about curriculum, academics, and policies in the final report. I think we'll be able to share a little more of the detail that supports the findings that we presented tonight that are mostly around climate, and share more specifics about demographic differences. And I think we may have some recommendations that are specific to, better inclusion and better serving specific subgroups, and then some that are more general. But we will include our analysis of the administrative data on student course taking and outcomes, as well as policy analysis, and then some more detailed breakdowns of the survey data as well in the final report.
And if I could just add that parallel to this, our educators are going to be doing a curriculum review through the DEI lens. We had hoped to do it this year. Unfortunately, we just did not have the bandwidth, and we didn't want to do it with half a heart and half a mind. We wanted to really invest our resources in learning how to use the rubrics and do it well. So we have educators K through 12 who will be training as trainers in late August to then roll this out at our full day of professional development in November, so that educators can then internalize how to look at their curriculum, whether they're planning an individual activity or a unit or a whole year. So that we will be kind of training ourselves to do on a regular basis, as well as Sarah and her team have taken a number of documents from the district that they're looking at, policies, protocols that they think are probably going to be the most telling and have the most useful information to make a difference. However, we also want to make sure that some of you school committee members and our leaders are trained in how to look at policies so that we can continue to do this work when NYU is in the background cheering for us at that point.
Other questions or comments? I mean, I look back to, it was a year ago that we had a school committee meeting looking at the beginning of this project, and we, I think, heard some really compelling views and experiences at that time from students, and really galvanized, the need for this work and the need for change. Hopefully now, as we are taking this opportunity to dive more deeply into this data, into all of the work that our advisory group has been shepherding along with NYU.
Compelling views and experiences at that time from students, and really galvanized, the need for this work.
Playing back.
Who's that speaker?
They sound so good.
But essentially, just that I think we all want to do better, and we want to be able to make change in the ways that will be the most meaningful for students and families. And so we're on the precipice of that moment, and I appreciate all of the comments and support that many of you have made, because we have our work cut out for us, but I'm hopeful. that we're on the right track.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Lizette. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Doug and Caleb, for coming.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you. All right. We have still many things before us this evening, and the next, again, slightly reordered. We were going to turn to you, Beth, I think, for the FLES update.
Yes. Okay. So, I'm sorry, I'm wearing multiple hats tonight.
Thank goodness.
I'm going to sleep well tonight. Okay, let's see. Share screen. Give me just 1 second. Sorry. I know there's people out there who are here to help me present, so if you want to get yourselves ready. Okay, here we go. All right, so we are going to walk you through a little bit of history and exciting news around our foreign language at the elementary school level. So this will be the third presentation to the school committee as the first group of kindergartners to start Spanish are finishing their 8th grade careers and are about to walk over to the high school and bring the FLES program with them. So this is our last transition, and we have educators here K through 12 who are going to talk about how we've been planning for this for 9+ years. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Brown, who is here reminiscing with an old friend, to talk about where did the FLES program come from and what were our goals.
So, 10 years ago when I started in Dover-Sherborn, I joined the FLES committee. They had already been steeped in a couple years of research and program visitation. From Massachusetts down to Alexandria, Virginia, where a very exemplar program existed. This committee made up of parents, educators, and teachers, and the then superintendent were very compelled by the benefits of introducing foreign language at the elementary level. In December 2012, we made a proposal to the then Dover and Sherborn school committees, and the program was adopted. In 2013-14, we started with the kindergarten cohort that Beth mentioned. Every year thereafter, we rolled the program up a grade. So we had a very thoughtful, a very fiscally prudent approach to implementing this K-5 program. As you can see, expected outcomes at the time, and I listed these right from our original presentation. The intent was that the program was mostly oral language based for the elementary students, that the FLES teachers connected their topics and themes with the curriculum in all other areas that students were learning in at those grade levels. It wasn't intended to be a standalone curriculum. You know, some programs teach verb tense and all of that drill stuff. This was intended to be a very integrated themes and topics, as I mentioned. It was intended that the teachers target to speak 95% of the time in Spanish language. It also was intended that in addition to speaking and listening benefits in Spanish language, that there be cultural studies, cultural experiences. We wanted our kids to also have an attempt at a more global perspective beyond that of their immediate community. The idea was that the students, when they got to middle school, would be able to enter, if they stayed in Spanish, and research said it didn't matter. The benefit for the brain is no matter whether they stayed with Spanish or swapped to another language, it didn't matter. But that children would be sort of a more sophisticated novice, if you will, in the speaking and listening, and be able to enter middle school Spanish at a higher level than where the curriculum had at that time currently met them. And then the program structure, thank you, Beth. The idea was that the frequency throughout the week was important for young kids, not necessarily the duration of the lessons. And that we were very committed to using the national standards for foreign language and making sure that we assessed children across the communication modalities of interpersonal, presentational, and interpretive, which is where our current report cards are reporting on student progress over time. We wanted it to be repetitive and experience-based, so knowing that we would have students move in at 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade along the way, and it wasn't intended that they would have a remediation or that we would back up the Spanish curriculum to meet them, but that they could, through immersion, have the repetition and, again, the experiential benefit of a very repetitive program experience in the Spanish language. We went with Spanish because we thought it's the most prevalent language other than English, and B, we thought we would be able to sustain hiring teachers who were native in the Spanish language versus if we had gone with Mandarin, which was the other language that we were really vetting. So that's and I mentioned Brookline, Weston, and Bedford, the programs that we modeled ourselves after at that time. So a little background language from 12 years ago.
Thank you. Now talking about FLES at the elementary level, now that it's come to full fruition, Dr. Reineman from Chickering.
I thought I would stand behind my friend Barb Brown here, but I'm not tall enough. Sorry. I can sit here. Good evening. We are so excited to share the highlights of our K-5 FLES program. As Barb mentioned, we built it as we were flying. As each year went along, Laura Roma was leading our program and building and teaching and writing curriculum as we went along, and we've matured and edited and refined and worked more with more educators, more FLES educators to help bring our program to life. So it matches, of course, beautifully with our Portrait of a Graduate in that we think about all 6 aspects: the effective communicator, the productive collaborator, the critical thinker, the engaged citizen, and the creative innovator, and the resilient learner, as in all of our classes and in FLES. So, and as usual, we've got a ton in every slide. I can't go through every bit of it. There are videos embedded in here as well, and I encourage you to go through and watch them later. I won't make you watch them tonight. The teachers at Pine Hill and Chickering put so much information into, I think we gave them 3 slides. So there's a ton in here. Whoops. That wasn't that good. Okay. So the big piece here is that by the end of elementary school, students that have been exposed to the FLES program for 5 years in a consistent manner should fall in the range of novice, mid-high, in some exceptional cases, intermediate, low oral proficiency based on the ACFO guidelines. What does that mean? Look at the little cute chart on the right. If you think about stacks of an ice cream cone, which is a delicious thought this time of year, you can see what it means by each level in proficiency. Okay, Barb. I'm sorry. All right. Here's a real surprise. The past 2 years have been anything but consistent. When in the spring of March 20, when we went fully remote, students did not receive direct instruction from their FLES teachers. We don't want to relive any of that. During the 2021 academic year, we reduced some of our FLES instruction time in an effort to make sure that we were hitting the basics in the classroom. Overall, we found we had less instruction time due to the logistics of COVID. Hand washing takes time. But despite these challenges, our students have made progress, and we are excited to see them continue and grow this year and in next year's with hopefully uninterrupted schooling. Okay, so this slide, Barb. Sorry, Beth. When you click ahead, click on white space, because otherwise all the videos will start. So, the effective communicator. Students learn how to communicate in various ways: writing, reading, speaking, and listening. As Barb said, it is not a memorize your vocabulary list and practice your verb conjugations. So we tie this in with our reading and writing instructions, so we are expressing our opinion in English as well as in our Spanish classes.
Hola, me llamo Reina Wu y soy de la clase de la señora Cummings. Tengo 10 años y no tengo hermanos. Soy de Boston, Massachusetts, pero mi familia soy de China. Me gustan los perros, pero no me gustan.
Okay. All right, there we go. Does anybody else want to drive? Jenny, I think we should.
All right, as a productive collaborator, students work in groups on projects and present. They have a country study where there's in fact, there's an example there of a poster about Cuba made by students in 3rd grade, hopefully in the white space. Made that one. As a critical thinker, students are asked to think about and question the world around them and the rest of the world. You've seen great examples of that already tonight. And so our students.
Sorry, I'm a little nervous.
Sorry. And then as an engaged citizen. Right? So again, great examples earlier. And then how students think about the world around them. So everything from when they were cooking at home, that was one of the advantages of COVID learning. And then Day of the Dead celebrations. And then there's a great little story about a student in 4th grade about when she went to Mexico and saw the signs about the beach turtles. It was just in White Hills. We're all up like, oh, it was real. Very exciting.
Oh, wait. Crazy. Okay,
wait. And as a creative innovator, right? Students embrace the art of being creative when it comes to acquiring another language and learning about other cultures. So it's not only the language, but it's the cultures, and the importance of recognizing that other people speak other languages, and our hope is that our students will have an appreciation for that and perhaps be bilingual, trilingual, and recognize that peers around them perhaps have another language as their first language. So again, it ties all the way back to our empathy on it.
And lastly, resilient learner. Right?
Yes, resilient learners. Learning and sticking with it. In the early classes, the teachers speak 100% in Spanish, and then so that's kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and all of a sudden about 4th grade they're traveling through the halls, and all of a sudden they realize that, wait a minute, they're speaking English. Boy, they're miffed because their whole language is in Spanish, and yes, she is bilingual. So,
Great, thank you. All right, so middle school, you're now complete with your program, so let's hear all about it. And I know that Senora Romer probably embedded lots of videos. This is going to be interesting. But I'd like to introduce Lainey Glenn, Curriculum Coordinator at the middle school.
Well, we didn't just embed videos, we actually embedded a presentation, so you see the link there. Yeah, okay. So, no, because we couldn't do what you just did, or I couldn't. Louder can do anything. I just want to say, first off, that my first move when they were coming up was to poach Laura because I needed a teacher who could meet them where they were, and that was Laura. So she has been writing curriculum ever since, and I can't thank her enough. So they came to us in 6th grade of 2019 without any sort of fears. They shed their fears and their hesitancy to communicate in a foreign language. They came into all 3 languages. With real benefits of being able to make comparisons, open their mouths, take risks. So we really were able to take advantage of everything they've done at Pine Hill and Chickering. And, the Spanish teachers have dutifully rewritten curriculum every year since, as they move up. And we've shifted our evaluation to be based on the 3 competencies: interpersonal, interpretive, and presentational, along with engagement and skills. So we have our rubric there that we use. It's a mastery-based rubric. You're free to check it out. You don't have to. It's a rubric, and we have the descriptors in there and everything, but we've shifted away from ABCD, and that's had a big impact because, now that one of the academic subjects has done that, it's opening the gates for maybe social studies and science and history to realize it's really a better way to evaluate. It's more thorough. It's actually more serious in a sense. So that was a positive as well. The presentation we have here. Okay, we did these here. Yes, it's now time. We have another slide at the very end, but it's now time for Senora Romero, who's really been walking the walk here. I just poached her and let her go. So.
Hi. So 8 years ago, when I came to present, I didn't wear glasses. Now every year I need a new pair of glasses so I can see. I have it here. To me, it's extremely amazing to see the 8th graders exiting because those are my babies. It's the first cohort that we have here, and I saw them growing, and some of them didn't continue with Spanish in middle school. Some of them are going back to Spanish in high school. But the point is that we've been working basically in skills. Right? When they enter our classrooms, it's not the Spanish classroom or the French classroom, it's the cultural classroom. The beauty of this program, and it's that if we can do a parallel with for the previous presentation with the equity and audit that we are going through right now, I think part of that, I feel super, I am privileged because our program, the language program, really fits the needs that the community is asking for. So we also have to go through a pandemic, and our students also have to be virtually in hybrid model, different cohorts. We had 3 teachers teaching a grade level that wasn't planned over the summer. However, these kiddos, they feel comfortable. They are ready to jump into the program. And we modified a little bit some things on our instruction here. We are more into big units, all of them aligned with current events in the world, and it's more interdisciplinary. It's not like just the language skills, although my students complain because they have to do a lot of grammar in middle school. Otherwise, the high school. Do you want to see the presentation? Can we put it's the last link. So I did attach a lot of samples for you of students' work. I would rather, Beth, if it's possible, not to show much because I don't want the students to appear on TV. But there are audios, interviews, kids presenting, the variety of samples for you to see. So how do we continue this program? Well, we first have to assess in 6th grade where they are at. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, the kids coming into 6th grade this year, it's not the same as the first cohort. So we have to readjust and readapt. And I'm very impressed with all the accomplishment that this 6th grade group did this year. There was a lot of progress. We are not evaluating anymore with grades, with letters or numbers. We are really basing everything on a rubric that the kids understand. So they can self-reflect every midterm on their own progress, and we give them the opportunity to see their progress, give us their feedback, and we have conversations. And for the most, we are on the same page. If they feel like they are progressing, probably I gave them a progressing. If they feel they are at the beginner level, if they understand what do they need. So we are concentrating on the learning process and building skills. Our goal is to send them to high school at an intermediate, low and mid level, which is pretty ambitious for a language. Kids should be able to have conversations on a topic that they know. Sometimes you can bring them out of that topic and they can also continue that conversation. They should be able to understand any sort of text at their level, analyze the text, reflect on the text, and give opinions. This is what we are aiming for by the time that they go to the high school. So it's all about skills. And it is happening. The reality is, because of these disruptions that we have, right now we are dealing with big gaps. So we have students here and students here and very little in between. So at some point we are gonna, hopefully, if we don't have any more disruptions, start, getting more on a common level. This is all that I have to say. We are working with the high school and trying to make sure that the transition is smooth and that they continue with this process, because it's basically a process and it's a life decision. We don't know if they're going to continue with the language or not. The point is that we are inspiring their curiosity, lose the fear of asking other people about their cultural background, because there's nothing wrong with that, and care about it. Why there are different perspectives? Why do we see from different lenses? How the same reality may look different for different people. And that's what we are trying to do here. So I hope this helps. There are a lot of videos and audios.
And I really encourage you to watch it.
If you want to play one audio, I don't mind.
Do you have a favorite?
All of them. Let me see. Keep going down. You are going to see the 4 competencies. Oh, another thing that I have to say that it's a wonderful thing is finally our state, it's up to date with the standards. Our standards were not updated until last year, which was really sad. Now they are on parallel with ACFO, which is our language association. So finally, Massachusetts has the standards on where they have to be, and we were working on this for 9 years already, so we don't have to do much work, right? So they did the work. You can go for the big one.
The blue one?
He gave me permission for it, so. This is a student that is comparing a book that we read in class with a book that he read in English.
Hola, estoy comparando los eventos en Mira Canyon's Vampirata con los eventos en el libro Ghost de Jason Reynolds. Vampirata ocurre en Newport, Rhode Island en 1741. Vampirata conocemos a una chica llamada Sarah, pero es muy sociable y no tengo amigos. Toda la gente de su comunidad la acusa.
Right, so this is a student in 7th grade. We read the story, we analyzed the story, we did a lot of activities, throughout the story, with a lot of cultural components. And then I asked them to just give me an opinion on what did they feel about this reading, and to compare the book with another story that it resembles, that they read in English, and that's what we decided to do. And they did it in class, and they have to do it on the spot. So,
Thank you. All right, Mr. Ferris, department chair at the high school, you're ready to receive these students, and that's just a 7th grader speaking. You haven't even met the 8th graders yet. So what would you like to tell us about your preparations?
Good evening. So we've known for a while that this first group is coming to us next year. In preparation, I thought it would be important for our high school teachers to understand how a second language is actually acquired based on research. So I purchased a book, this book here. Bill Van Patten is one of the foremost experts on second language acquisition, and the book is written for teachers with the teacher in mind. And he talks a lot about in the book about the challenges in terms of how language is actually acquired and how language is taught in classrooms and how to try to meld those two together. One thing, before I keep going, I just want to point out that, as we're all well aware, high school students are a different animal than middle school students and elementary students. There's a difference in age. Grades are very important. To high school students, getting into college is very important. What looks good on their transcript. They're also adult learners. They're not child learners, so they learn in a somewhat different way. So all those things need to be taken into consideration. The approach that it has been used at the elementary and middle school level is usually referred to as the proficiency-based approach. I like Bill Van Patten's term for it, the communicative language teaching. which not a focus on grammar and memorization, but communicating. The purpose of language is to communicate and to do those things in the classroom in the target language. And this is done through what's called comprehensible input, if you've heard that term before. In discussing this deep dive we did with this book, we talked about what is communication. And it seems like a simple question, but it doesn't have a simple answer. Also, the limits of explicit teaching of, say, grammar structures. What is the role of that? And that's something that for the future we need to think about and do some professional development around. What are the internal and external factors within a learner's within a learner in the classroom that affect their ability to learn or not learn or acquire the second language? So we did a deep dive into that in preparation for these students coming. The good thing is that we have very experienced teachers who've been teaching for a long time, who are open-minded and want our students to acquire the language, but it's a complicated thing, especially when you're dealing with certain constraints within, say, as I mentioned before, the high school setting. The seal of biliteracy, I'm sure you're familiar with. We did a presentation on it a couple of years ago. We adopted that 2 years ago. Excuse me. One of the goals that we have with well, of course, it's a nationwide and also statewide initiative. But one of the goals is to kind of shift the idea that AP is not the only goal for students. It's the goal for some of our students, and getting a 5 on the AP exam is wonderful, but that's not realistic for all our students. The goal for language is to acquire it and to be able to communicate it, and they can prove that by applying to the seal of biliteracy. The visits to the 8th grade classrooms, we were not able to do that this year. In previous years, we did some visits to the elementary classrooms. So I think one of the issues is until those students are in our classroom and in front of us and we're teaching them and interacting with them, it's not as real. So I think once they're with us, we'll see that you know, I don't expect this to be a huge shock given that the teachers know what this program is about. But I think I would like to encourage our Spanish teachers particularly to visit the middle school classrooms to get a sense of what is it that's going on at the middle school and what is it that goes on in the high school classroom. I would say, I don't want to give the wrong impression, I always tell our teachers that the high school, a lot of what you do is proficiency based. You just don't call it that. You don't label it as such. It's just things that you do inherently through good teaching. But that doesn't mean that shifts don't need to happen or some change needs to occur. I mentioned the PD on the appropriate and effective use of grammar instruction. It's a continual discussion. One of the things that I was thinking about today, and through the PD, hopefully this will be discovered, is, are all grammar structures equal? Are some best acquired over time by continual exposure to comprehensible input, but maybe other grammatical structures are more efficiently acquired by targeted exposure? Maybe even with some explicit teaching of those grammar structures. So again, the focus isn't on grammar, but maybe there are some grammar structures that need some of that explicit teaching to be acquired more efficiently. So this is an ongoing discussion. It's an ongoing discussion among all world language teachers everywhere. What is the appropriate amount of grammar instruction in a classroom, particularly at the high school level, where you're trying to get them to that intermediate high level? Which requires sophisticated grammar structures in order to communicate at an intermediate high level. Also, Laura mentioned the World Language Curriculum Framework that was released last year. It's a 47-page document with very small font and a lot of information in there. So it's something I'll taking a dive into as at the high school to familiarize ourselves. As Laura mentioned, it is much more tied to the actual standards. There's a lot of, there's also a couple of other things that, there's some verbiage in there about social and emotional learning, as well as social justice. So that's something that was never in the frameworks before. That's not even in the actual standards. So that's something interesting for us to delve into in future years. Challenges. I'm going to say it. So I wrote this down today. I said, some of the experiences that students and teachers find the most entertaining and fun are not the most productive use of class time. So it's something that we need. So one of the things about a proficiency model is that the idea is to have as much communicating going on in the classroom as possible. And I'm not saying it's wrong to play games or do things like that, but is that really communication, or is that just a way to have fun? So that's something that, all these things we have to self-reflect. Are we using the class time the most effectively that we can? Also, assessment, it's something that's a continual sort of reassessing how we assess. Are we assessing for the things that we want them to know and to be able to do? The grammar instruction, which I mentioned before. And also change, as we all know, change is difficult. And I remember from my graduate program in administration, studying organizations where people in organizations would be given information that what they were doing was ineffective, and they still wouldn't change, because it's just inherent in human nature. Change is hard and it's uncomfortable sometimes, but it's if you're a lifelong learner and you really want to do the best you can and learn, is what I'm doing effective, or is what I'm doing maybe not as effective as it could be? Those are things that we all need to be able to do to continually to improve what we do. So that's all I have to say for tonight. There's a lot more I could say, but this is all very complicated, how language is acquired and so on and so forth. And so I'm finished if anyone has any questions or comments.
Thank you. So we now have a whole strand working on the flexible program K-12, and I hope some of what you heard tonight is that through the efforts of our elementary educators, it's really about getting the students to be comfortable taking risks and using a language and not having to be perfect all the time. But then the challenges as they get older and get to the high school and they're getting closer to potentially wanting to major in a foreign language in school, at some point you have to worry about grammar and being correct. So where is that balance? And so that's something that our high school teachers are continually working on. There'll be professional development this fall. But in the meantime, K through 12, we do hope that they are finding opportunities to communicate as much as possible during their time in school. So
I think I would just add that, and that's what I say when I go to the elementary schools, you never lose out when you take another language. So for each language they take, they actually get better at all of their languages, right? So the ones that might go back to Spanish after 3 years of French or Latin here won't really have missed that much because they're getting language. And honestly, the more, it sounds counterintuitive, but the more languages you learn, the better you get at each and every one of them. It just unlocks something in your brain. So it's been really exciting to watch the Spanish kids from the elementary schools blossom in French and Latin as well. It carries over. Latin's a very different language in its structure, but they see all kinds of connections and they embrace those changes, and it's just a different student that we get in the classroom. And it's been wonderful.
No.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I don't know if there's any comments or questions. Sarah, I leave that up to you.
Comments or questions? Maggie?
I just had a curiosity. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lara, and thank you, Lainey, and thank you, Jeff. It's been really fun to see this come to fruition. I remember sitting, I think, in the audience at a meeting when we were first going down the road, so it's really exciting. Have you seen any changes in the election of languages through the different points of entry, or has it remained consistent? I know you said it's sort of enhanced all of the.
Well, it's pretty consistent, which, obviously the French and Latin teachers had some trepidation. And COVID did have an impact because we couldn't do our song and dance at the elementary school years, which, was painful. But this year, incoming 6th grade, it's almost exactly even for French and Spanish, 68 and 71. And, Latin's chugging along at 38 for 2 sections, but that's what we've always had. It's always been 2 sections of Latin and 4 French and Spanish. So you will always have the oddballs who choose Latin, yes. So no, it has not had the impact because, and Laura was wonderful about this when she said the elementary schools, the kids will come and they'll be curious about a different language. Like maybe they just want to switch. They've had 6 years of Spanish. Others are like, I just want to keep going. I want to get better and better and better. There are several kids from whom I benefit who don't like speaking the language, the more visual learner. So it hasn't impacted enrollment. It's only enhanced all 3 languages.
So what I'm hearing, just for my own, on-ramps in terms of like a student being able to pick up the language, whether or not they've participated in FLES, maybe they move here from a different community in 6th grade, they can choose Spanish, French, or Latin.
They can't choose Spanish as an entry level.
Okay.
Right? They can choose it at the elementary or at the high school.
Okay. So when we have new students that move here
they
from.
They can choose between French and Latin, and then they can pick up Spanish at the high school. Okay. So the way it works in the district is you can begin Spanish at the elementary school. Mm-hmm. You can begin French or Latin only at the middle school. And at the high school, you can begin Chinese, continue Latin, continue French, or begin Spanish.
Okay.
So those are all.
So thank you. I appreciate that.
So and I forgot to mention this, one of the challenges moving forward perhaps might be, traditionally, kids would take 3 years of Spanish at the middle school. Mm-hmm. And then they would come to the high school, and we place them in what we call Novice 3. Then we would have some kids that would start as freshmen, and say they had taken French or Latin, and they would take 2 years, and in their 3rd year, they would be in the same class as those kids who had had it for 3 years. Now that we have kids who've gone through an entire elementary program and 3 years of Spanish at the middle school, I'm not sure those kids who've taken it for 2 years at the high school will be able to go in that same course. So I've talked to guidance about this. It's something that we need to discuss. So that's one of the challenges.
Yeah. Well, from my point of view, I appreciate the thoughtfulness with which you guys are tackling all the challenges and sort of providing the on-ramps. My mind is always at making sure that we have entry points and on-ramps for all of our students, no matter when they move to us. I know we have students at the middle levels who, for academic needs aren't necessarily able to, do the full language program. And I just want to always keep in mind that we have opportunities for them to pick up multiple things once they get to the high school. And I know that, I can just see all the different, it's like a spaghetti chart.
Kids who enter the middle school and kids who enter the high school each have 2 choices.
Great.
So that's good. For a district our size.
Yep.
That's decent.
Fantastic.
Other comments, questions?
Just a quick one. Can I have I'm sure you said it. Can I have the name of the book you referred to?
Oh, it was on the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Bill Van Patten, while we're on the topic.
While we're on this, thank you so much. Thank you.
It's an easy read, so.
Thank you.
And I wanted to ask, I know a lot of work went into the slides and there are student samples. Could we have a copy of the slides at some point?
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I just want to say thank you, Senora Romer. My son, who was in 7th grade, had you during the pandemic, and you put in so much work on a hourly, daily basis to ensure that those kids were still listening, speaking, practicing with one another, and involved and engaged.
Complain about the grammar, I have to tell you.
If he ever complained, I said, you can't complain. You know how much work she's doing behind the scenes to make sure that this is ready. So anyway, thank you.
And one of the only educators, I'm sure, in our district who's gone from K to 8.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yes. You see her eyes?
What a wonderful perspective.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have one more comment. I just wanted to share gratitude for the program in general. As the parent of an 8th grader who was in the original cohort, he actually joined in 1st grade, and a parent of a rising 6th grader. Neither of my older kids chose to continue Spanish yet. I mean, maybe they'll go back to it. And then my daughter's in 3rd grade now. And I have to say, beyond just the language skill, the excitement they have for languages, to the point where they really wanted to learn languages and they're really curious about the world. And I just think the program has so many benefits, even if kids don't continue studying language beyond here. I just think it's a whole mindset that works so well with our approach as a graduate, and I'm just so grateful to be here and have that.
Yes. Thank you. Muchas gracias, Senora. All right, so hearing no other questions or comments, thank you to all. Our next update is we're now shifting gears to Kathy, your section in the central office.
I am. So first of all, before I see Lainey and the team running out, I want to say to everybody that pretty soon, I know Lainey, you'll be scheduling all kinds of trips. So I'm sure everybody here with children learning all of these languages also have wonderful opportunities that you present. So thank you for that excellent presentation. Also, before I go on, I will also echo what Sarah said in the beginning. And one of the things that she said to all of you after that wonderful presentation by NYU involving so many people in this district is I also sat here a year ago. It was my first introduction to the community. I was overwhelmed that 16 of you sat here. As I looked around, it wasn't what I thought a school committee was. But I will tell you, and I have to commend your new superintendent coming on board and all of you, because truly you are courageous. And I knew that evening that this was the place I wanted to be, and I have learned so much. You know that I've come from a very diverse district in coming here. But truly, the work is tremendous. I can't wait to see what happens in the years ahead, because truly, the people that benefit are these young people that we continue to hear about this evening. They will be the future leaders. They will benefit from your courage at this point. And as I said, I can't thank you enough, Beth, because I watched you every step of the way with the commitment, making sure that groups were meeting, making sure all kinds of voices were heard, that there were forums, and and I know there was a lot of work that went on behind the scenes. So again, thank you so much. So going forward, also school committee, one of the things that you gave me, and it became sometime, I want to say in December, early December, after we had been together for a number of professional developments, which all of you were committed to. You gave me 3 big rocks, and I want to remind everybody, and we're going to talk about them this evening. One of the ones you said was, superintendent, we need you to transition in the new superintendent. And lo and behold, not only have Beth and I worked very closely together all year, but just the other evening you did your last professional development, and 13 of you were able to come in person and do a review with MASC of the superintendent evaluation process, which I know is overwhelming, but again, like we do with our own teachers, it is truly looking at the growth and making sure that that support is there. So I will tell you that we have spent that time transitioning, so to me that's a check. The last 2 that you're going to hear about this evening is, you also said to me that evening is, Superintendent Smith, we want to take a look at, we want to be reflective in looking at our HR functions. And I remember that evening saying to you, you know what, I haven't been here a long time, but let's look at the central office because it is all interconnected. We went forward, we were able to, and again, I thank our team, our business administrator, for finding the funding to be able to bring on board the Collins Center, which is certainly known throughout the state in its work to support entities like a school district, to look at our functions, look at our efficiencies, and make recommendations after talking to, doing an audit to the very people here. So I know it's late, so without further ado, I want to bring on a team who has been dedicated to doing this work. From the Collins Center, Dr. Ann Wilson, who is a former superintendent and now works as an associate, and Heather Michard, who is a public services manager. And also, I do want to call out my friend and colleague, Ray Shurtleff, who is a gentleman that I have worked with in so many organizations and has benefited me during my time in a number of districts. And he and I spoke at length about kicking this process off. So without further ado, I know they've waited a long time. I'd like to hand it over to your team.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you for having us. I'm not sure how we're going to do this. Beth, do you want to share your screen? Do you want me to try and share my screen? We do have a presentation prepared.
So you have permission to share your screen. If you wouldn't mind driving for a little bit, that would be great.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Hopefully everyone can see that as the presentation, not the presenter mode. All right, perfect. So we wanted to thank you today for letting us come in and provide some information on a study that we engaged with Dover-Sherborn over the past several months, specifically targeting its central office organizational structure with a specific focus on human resources, tasks, and duties. But first, I wanted to introduce the Collins Center because we have noted that many people haven't heard of the center before. So I'm just going to provide a little bit of background if you don't mind. The Edward J. Collins Center was for Public Management was established by the state legislature in July of 2008. We are a mission-driven organization which provides technical support to cities and towns, school districts, and other quasi-public and not-for-profit entities. More specifically, the center offers services in municipal finance, human resources, communications, operations, and information technology, to name a few. The mission that drives us daily to help government work better is simply as the slide states. The Collins Center is dedicated to improving the efficiency, effectiveness, governance, responsiveness, and accountability of public sector organizations, with a particular focus on local and state governments. So the center has a deep bench of practitioner consultants with decades of direct experience in a variety of institutions. Because our breadth of experience, each project receives a well-rounded team of professionals to provide a range of support. In the case of Dover-Sherborn's organizational study, the team brought expertise in public school organizational analysis, human resources tasks and duties, central office support structures, and best practices for school operations. Anne?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for allowing us to be here this evening. I thoroughly enjoyed working with your team here at Dover-Sherborn, and we look forward to giving you an overview of our work while we await the final report. So tonight, we will go over an introduction to the study, including goals, process, and methodology. We'll talk about cohort district selection and how that was determined. We will talk about the data collection phase of our study, overarching trends that we have found, and the recommendation areas that the committee will read more about in our report, which is due in July. So the study, the Dover-Sherborn Public School District engaged the Collins Center to look at the organizational structure of the central office, including the entire administrative team and operational support positions. There was a particular interest expressed in human resources functions. And so the school district requested us to conduct 3 major analyses to develop some recommendations for potential adoption by the school district. So 1, the study of the organizational structure, staffing and practices of central administration operations, the human resources functions in the district, and a review of organizational structures and best practices of similar-sized regional school districts. The goals of the study were to provide recommendations in 2 areas. One being staffing and efficiencies for administration, and to do this in a way that doesn't compromise the Dover-Sherborn School District's ability to fund any increase that may be necessary. And second, to enhance central office organizational structure to support the district's mission.
And so the process and the timeline that we put together for this particular study is as follows. An initial meeting with some key stakeholders was put into place to provide context into the Dover-Sherborn community for the team, as well as to cover the necessary elements with the selected in-district team and go over the timeline of the project. Then the next process step would be to conduct the on-site and remote interviews with a select group of individuals. After that, there were 2 surveys that were developed. One was an internal survey targeting human resources tasks and duties. And then the second was a survey to the cohort districts, selected districts targeting their central office organizational structures, specifically gathering information on human resources personnel. Then the idea would be to review the data that came in from those prior elements and analyze it, then develop the recommendations, which is the step that we're currently in, and then finally write the report, which is due in July. As you can see, the timeline breaks down how these processes were impactful over the last several months, beginning in March and ending in July.
So the methodology that we utilized had 4 major components. The first was interviews, some in person and some through Zoom, with the district administrators and the central office support staff, as well as school committee representatives and teacher union representatives. The internal study that Heather mentioned earlier targeted human resources tasks, and everyone who was interviewed had the opportunity to take this internal survey. The idea here was to assess the individual position responsibilities and to identify which parts of the human resources tasks had people primarily responsible and some people who might be supporting those tasks. We'll go into that further later in this presentation. And then the cohort district survey was provided to several districts that were deemed to be comparable, and included questions around human resources personnel, responsibilities, and their organizational structure. So we will share that with you as well. And then finally, we did a document review. We reviewed the organizational chart provided to us by the district, available job descriptions that were provided by the district, financial information, the strategic plan, and any other documents that may have been online. Heather will now discuss the process for selecting cohort districts and data collection.
Thanks, Anne. This is a very important part of the methodology, so the team felt it was necessary to describe how we came about developing the cohort district model. Essentially, what we ended up utilizing because of what the study was looking at was 2 variables, enrollment and relative district wealth as calculated by DESE. So I wanted to provide the relative district wealth definition according to DESE. It's noted on the slide, but essentially it's defined as an indicator of community wealth, which is personal income and property value, calculated for the Chapter 78 program. A district at 100% has the capacity to fully fund its foundation budget. Districts at less than 100% are less wealthy, with less personal income and property value, and districts at more than 100% are more wealthy. So in addition to those 2 variables, the administration also desired inclusion of other regional-like school districts, which became a secondary driver to developing the cohort. The first piece of analysis that was conducted on districts, all Massachusetts districts, was looking strictly at enrollment. The enrollment swing that we utilized to narrow right-sized districts was plus or minus 500 students using the fiscal year 2020 DESE figures. Just so this group knows, the reason why FY 2020 enrollment figures were leveraged was to match the most recent relative district wealth calculations available. So after providing that information or pulling that information from DESE, 32 school districts met the enrollment criteria. Thus, we moved on to the second variable of relative district wealth. The relative district wealth section, as I mentioned, is calculated by DESE. Dover-Sherborn has a relatively high relative district wealth at 205%, as calculated in 2020. Therefore, the threshold that the team targeted was any district meeting the enrollment criteria and also exceeding 100% of relative district wealth. That demarcation brought forward 14 districts. The team then applied the final variable, which was the request specific by administration to include regional school districts to that pool. Only 2 districts emerged, Monomoy Regional and Nauset Regional. Nauset being a very relevant comparison as it also functions as a superintendency union and regional school district, which is similar to the way Dover-Sherborn is organized. Separately, the team felt as though Ashburnham Westminster, though it fell below the 100% wealth threshold, we were interested in seeing the central office staffing of a district that was not only regional, but had similar enrollment standards with less resources. We were curious to see what their central office staffing looked like. So we decided to add them to the pool. Alongside the identified regional districts, Medfield and Weston were also added to the cohort as both districts met the enrollment and relative district wealth components, as well as historically been used by Dover-Sherborn in various comparative models, such as negotiations. So the 5 districts that were identified as being your cohort for this particular study were Ashburnham Westminster, Medfield, Monomoy Regional, Nauset Regional, and Weston. This next slide is going to summarize the data collection details from each one of these components. So the first component that we looked at, as Anne had mentioned, was either individual or small group interview sessions. A total of 21 were performed over several days. It breaks down into 4 central office administrators, 6 central office support staff, 9 director program supervisors, 4 principals, 3 teacher union representatives, and 6 school committee representatives. And then to combine the 2 internal the 2 surveys, the first one being the internal, there was a total of 19 respondents from that internal Dover-Sherborn survey. The breakdown of the respondents were 3 central office administrators, 2 central office support staff, 6 director program supervisors, 4 principals, and 4 personnel that labeled themselves other. And then we received a 100% response rate from the cohort district sampling, which was amazing, and we thank Dover-Sherborn's administration for assisting us with gathering that information. So from that cohort, you received 2 local district responses, 2 regional district responses, and 2, including Dover-Sherborn, regional superintendency union district responses. And then finally, as a portion of the document review, 21 total documents were provided by the district and reviewed by the team. It was the strategic plan, the organizational chart, 9 financial documents, and 10 job descriptions in total. So that was the document review data that was utilized to really leverage for the survey or for the organizational study.
So to give you now an overview of the general trends that we found, and again, things will be much more detailed in the report that is coming your way in July. Before going into these, I would just like to say that it was an absolute pleasure to participate in the interviews with the staff at Dover-Sherborn. Everyone was welcoming, everyone was forthcoming, and I'm quite frankly very pleased to be part of this process and very happy that administration was doing this study. So first, the general trends. Dover-Sherborn has a lot of pride. The people that we talk to are extremely proud to be in Dover-Sherborn. They described a family atmosphere, and it was evident that this is a very close-knit community. Staff also believe that the central office personnel are hardworking, and they're always able to assist and available to assist. And then finally, everyone that we spoke with was very welcoming of implementations of new processes and procedures and a desire to have additional training. A few other things, and again, these next four are the ones around which we will provide recommendations that are actionable in our final report. There's no person primarily responsible for human resources who is either licensed or specially trained for human resources functions. There's a lack of clarity surrounding many of the human resources functions within the district. There's a lack of clarity around decision-making authority for certain human resources operations. And finally, central office positions cover multiple areas of responsibility that are not necessarily defined in the current job descriptions. And this includes the multiple duties associated with their role, as well as human resources duties which are spread across the system. So what I'd like to go into detail a bit for you is the internal survey. This survey that we have discussed previously included 15 human resource focus areas. And within those 15 areas, there were multiple tasks and functions of a human resource department. 10 of those 15 focus areas depicted gaps in identifying a responsible person to oversee those functions. You see in the slide here the 10 areas that have no one that is specifically responsible. It doesn't mean that some of those things are not being done by multiple people. However, there isn't someone whose job it is specifically to oversee these areas. Next slide, we'll go into some detail. So this graph depicts the 15 areas. And where you see the green bars, that shows that there is someone primarily responsible for a function within that area. So the first one is recruitment. See, there are many people that are responsible for many of the areas, the tasks within recruitment. However, the blue reflects certain elements of that component where there isn't someone that is primarily responsible. So what I'd like to do now is to go through the areas where you see some blue and identify for you some of those elements of each of those focus areas that are not with someone who is primarily responsible. So in recruitment, there is no one who has identified themselves or we had any other evidence of responsible for the development of a district recruitment plan or a workforce diversity plan. You see in the next slide, hiring, there are people responsible and sometimes multiple people for all of the different tasks within hiring. Induction and retention, there was no one identified as primarily responsible for the development of a teacher retention plan or the development of a succession plan. In staffing issues, there was no one identified as primarily responsible for preparation and updating of organizational charts, review of the superintendent checklist, which is something that superintendents receive every year from the Department of Ed, and it contains many, many, many tasks, many of which actually relate to human resources functions. There was no one primarily responsible for monitoring the educated data required by DESE or managing transfers within the system. We'll move down to licensure. There was no one primarily responsible for ELAR input, and ELAR is the Educator Licensure and Personnel report that needs to be done every year. I would not say that it's not happening, but there was no one whose primary responsibility it was. There may be multiple people who do pieces of it, but no one was identified as primarily responsible. Within Human Resources Information System, there was no one responsible primarily for EPIMS reporting to Department of Ed. The EPIMS is the Education Personnel Information Management System, which includes all types of information about personnel that needs to be reported annually to the Department of Ed. Performance evaluation. No one was primarily responsible for principal performance evaluation implementation and tracking, or central office performance evaluation implementation and evaluation tracking. Within the area of employee labor relations, there was no one identified as responsible for processing grievances. We're aware that there may not be many grievances. However, there needs to be someone responsible when there is a grievance or other employee labor matter. And the next area had several, the next focus area had several components where there wasn't someone responsible. And these all fall very clearly within the human resources personnel area. So Fair Labor and Standards Act, compliance training for harassment civil rights, implementation of SAPIS, which is the fingerprinting, and CORI. I'm not sure if there is any need for civil service appointing authority and oversight within your school district, but there was no one identified as responsible for that. And also there was no one identified as primarily responsible for the sexual harassment policy. Within the area of substitute teachers, there is someone who does substitute calling and places substitutes in your schools. We're aware of that. However, there wasn't anyone primarily responsible for substitute recruitment, conducting interviews, training for substitute teachers, and oversight and monitoring of substitute online system. And then finally, within the area of professional development, there is obviously evidence of professional development within your district. However, there was no one who was identified as primarily responsible to coordinate and support professional development for the central office support staff, central office administrators, school-based administrators, or anyone that was primarily responsible for implementing a district-wide professional development program. And that would be a program that's inclusive of all staff members, not only the teaching staff. So next, Heather will review the human resources personnel trends from our cohort districts.
Perfect. Thanks, Anne. So we had mentioned that we received responses from all 6 districts, including Dover-Sherborn, for the cohort district survey model. And we were specifically targeting human resources personnel and human resources responsibilities from each one of those districts. So the graph depicts all cohort districts except Dover-Sherborn have at least one staff member assigned full-time to human resources. Further, 4 out of the 6 districts have 2 or more staff members assigned full-time to human resources, Dover-Sherborn and Monomoy Regional being the outliers. And then finally, the other interesting aspect that came back from the survey was human resources responsibilities at Dover-Sherborn was an outlier, being that it's the only district who divides human resources responsibilities between central office administrators, central office support staff, and town personnel. Essentially, what the information that was garnered from the survey was, Dover-Sherborn's model, while it certainly has functioned for your district for some time, is different than the rest of the cohort districts that were selected for this purpose and study. And now Anne will talk about recommendation areas we're discussing.
So finally, as you look forward to receiving the final report, you will see specific actionable recommendations in 3 areas of focus. 1, the superintendent's office and central office support, human resources, and the business office. These all work together and are integrated to provide coherence of district operations. You are very fortunate. You have a great opportunity right now with a new superintendent coming in who has knowledge of your district and is being welcomed with open arms throughout the district to build on the positive things that are already in place. It's an opportunity to capitalize on that pride and the hard work that was very evident through our study, an opportunity to build a new team and establish some very clear position responsibilities to identify the human resources functions and someone who could be that go-to person for human resources, and to think about the training and the opportunities for collaboration that are at your feet right now. So again, it was an absolute pleasure to work with your school system, and we are really excited for you to receive the final report and see the recommendations.
So in conclusion, we just again wanted to thank district administration and the district in general. I will echo everything that Ann said. We were welcomed and people were just amazingly open to discussions and providing their feedback. And again, the district is in such a fantastic place if it was to make some changes and implement some new things as we're coming out of this pandemic and we're finding a new norm. So we congratulate you for going down this road and for whatever you may bring in the future.
Well, thank you. Thank you to the folks at the Collins Center and everyone who participated in this audit. It sounds like we can look forward to some more detail on recommendations shortly, and appreciate that opportunity. Are there questions, comments concerning the Collins Center? Judy?
Yeah, this is a question on why was relative wealth used to develop the cohort?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, why was relative wealth used to develop the cohort? I don't know anything about developing cohorts, but it just seems a little odd to me.
So when you look at certain types of districts, it's often important to look at the study, and this study had nothing to do with performance, things of that nature that had to do with student. This was strictly from an organizational structure review and more specifically human resources tasks and duties. So the idea was to find like districts, and that was included from a wealth perspective, how much the state believes a district can fund its full budget, and then number two, enrollment. Rather than looking at student performance or even demographics that really wouldn't have impacted this section, that's why we chose to do the two pieces of enrollment and then, of course, what DESE considers to be a district's wealth.
But why? Why is wealth relevant? I'm not arguing with you. I'm asking. There's a million factors you could use.
Yeah, I think it's based on like what we can afford position wise to staff.
Because of how we're funded.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so essentially what part of the study that we were told is we wanted to look at like districts, and eventually when we make recommendations, they needed to be recommendations that would fit for Dover-Sherborn's budget capacity. So that's why we chose to pull the relative district wealth of other like districts.
I guess, can I add? I think also that if we look, by using that lens, we're looking at districts that have the same things available to them. So like we don't have the lever of state aid that a community that had less wealth would have. We don't have the lever of maybe grant opportunities that a community that had less resources would have. We also maybe don't have all the same needs in human resources in the context, or in the needs of the central office in the context that we have less demand for, say, managing all those kinds of grants and federal programs and assistance that like help school districts, but also are labor intensive in terms of central office management, reporting, and all those things. So it's just, those are other places that would have the same sort of ability to potentially pay for the sources and also issues on their plates that we would have.
Can I make a comment also? So right in the beginning, and I've been here the year, people do a whole lot of hard work around here, and they do a great job. Again, getting teachers on board, staff that stays. But this truly I think is an opportunity. If you look at, and again, I can't say enough about my staff, my administrative assistant, the hours put in. If you take certain things off of the plate of your assistant superintendent, your new assistant superintendent coming on board, they will be able to focus on supporting curriculum, supporting instruction, supporting that equity work instead of some of the human resource functions that are happening. As superintendent in districts large and small, some of the biggest things that I dealt with every single day had to do with employees, around so many things. And interesting enough, you heard them talk about grievances. We have avoided that because we've actually, during a very challenging time, had open communications, negotiations at the beginning of the year. So you've done a really good job. I hope people see this as a blueprint. We still have some work to do. We still have to go through some of the findings. Obviously, any good organization. Beth and I sat for 2 hours the other day looking at things that Beth had intimate knowledge of that didn't quite fit. Not somebody's opinion, but just things that aren't really the functions in our district. Dawn and Beth will have a chance to sit down. There were some things, again, looking at our business office. There's lots of way to improve. We just need to make sure that right information is getting to you. So I hope you see this as a blueprint. I also will thank the Collins Center because they were available, for hours, every step of the way to explain. And it's hard to be reflective. It's really hard to be reflective. So I don't want to miss the message. You have a great school system. People do really great work here. And I hope we can, over the next few years. One more thing I'll tell you, when you talk about recruitment, we had an opportunity to go to a recruitment fair. And I will never forget Dr. Brown saying to me, Kathy, I want you to know we were right next to Weymouth. And Weymouth is looking like everybody else, diversity, a changing community. And we had 2 people volunteer to go. They volunteered. We kind of put together some materials. We need to be better than that. You need to be getting those teachers and recruiting, looking at diversity. We need to be out there just as Dover-Sherborn should, having somebody that is their job. They're looking, to be out there, to be at all of these job fairs, and it'll just strengthen you as a district. So again, I commend you for, it isn't always easy, but I felt the reflection was very helpful, and I hope it's a blueprint, for years to come, actually.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy.
One thing that struck me, and actually this is along the lines of what you just said, Kathy, is a lot of the places we have gaps feel to me like places that have implications for equity and security, just thinking about substitutes and PD and making sure that all the people coming into the district on a daily basis have the same kinds of trainings that our teachers do, hiring and retaining staff, which is a big thing. Succession planning, so we're fostering relationships that make people want to stay and help people move up to next level. So I think that this is really valuable and overlaps with a lot of the other things we're thinking about anyway. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm mindful that it's getting late in the evening and we still have things to get through on our agenda. So next up, communication from you, Kathy.
Before I go to communication, it just seems like a real segue, and thank you to the Collins Center. But I was having discussion with a number of school committee members, and I do have to acknowledge, when you think about the human resource work, is looking at what this year has been. It has been nothing short of challenging, and I don't think that was the hope a year ago. And we came through, again, people have done an excellent job, but it's really taken its toll. So again, our teachers have done yeoman's work. And you can read, I was just handed an article by one of the school committee members today. It actually quotes the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardozo, I believe it is, at the federal level. And the talk is out there about people leaving the profession. People feeling, Dr. Brown used the word broken. I don't think we're any of those things, but I will say from the superintendent all down, we are exhausted. And, we have done everything that we can this year to do exactly what you expected as a community. Make sure our kids were in school 5 days a week. Make sure we were paying attention to social and emotional learning, getting back to routines, making sure there was a wonderful graduation, a prom, events, from our little preschoolers all the way to our students that just walked across the stage. But when we talk about human resources, and supporting. And I've been in a district at a very different time where we had such a budget challenge that I knew coming back as the superintendent after laying off 80 teachers when it wasn't an enrollment issue, what did we have to do? And we had to really support that whole year, pay attention to the culture, making sure that every step of the way we were looking at the mental, the physical health of our staff members. And I loved having the conversation today with the school committee member who said to me, we just need to take a breath. We need to do some, mindfulness, some breathing and not necessarily, take some time, with our children also. So I do want to acknowledge that we have work ahead of us. I'm not prepared to really talk about it this evening, and I get to hand that off to you, Superintendent McCoy. But I know that all of the things that we talked about, resourcing ourselves well, will help us really support our teachers and our support staff. So I hope I've addressed that a little bit this evening. Thank you to the community. You are great to the teachers, to the parent groups who come in and supply breakfasts and goodies and really let your teachers and your staff know how much they have meant during a challenging time. So thank you. And that being said, the other thing in the Big Rock was communication. And we've already talked about our website. We have a plan. We've actually met with Final Site. I'm very excited for what will happen this coming summer into the fall and starting to work on our website. We also are fortunate to have Dana Lanham really fall in our lap. She's a Sherborn resident, and she also has had a lot of patience, not just tonight, but in working with us when we've had so many other things on the front burner. So she is going to share with you some information on the survey that we sent out to the community. We've got a couple of products that we're going to have for you, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I know I'm holding up one of them, and we're very pleased with going forward with this communication plan. So Dana, are you with us?
I am here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Right, I'm a little hoarse. I don't know why. First off, I just have to say, I'm supposed to be there, but I was enjoying tonight so much that I looked at my watch and went, oh, totally missed the opportunity to get in the car and be there. So I apologize. You're going to look at me on Zoom.
I got nervous.
I look at the measure of a great meeting as one where I don't have to cook. So thank you for going a little long. I'm here obviously to talk communications with you guys. And I have enjoyed getting to know most of you guys. I know not everybody has been there in person, but thank you for being there to take some photos and welcome me from the school committee. And Kathy and Beth and Cheryl and Dawn and Kate have just been wonderful to work with and have really welcomed me as well. So it is a testament to the community. I have to say that regularly. I am a parent, but I am a marketer. So with that, we did a stakeholder research survey. I'll say it was a light survey for a reason. There's been a lot of research going on across the parent groups with the equity audit and a lot of other things on ongoing discussion. So the last thing you want to do is hit a group with a 50-question survey. They're not going to answer it. We were lucky to get 260 responses to the stakeholder research. It was to parents and caregivers only. We will go out with other ones for students and faculty in the future, especially as we head down the path of creating a new website. But first, it's most important to figure out where we are right now with website and with communications, how often our constituents or stakeholders want to be reached out with, what kind of information they're looking for. So of the 260 respondents, 42% of them had students in the middle school. So they might have had multiple students, but it was interesting that the ones that responded, 42% had middle school students. Email is their current preferred way to receive district communications. That does not mean it will always be that way. Because once we get a website that's functioning, it would be easy to make the assumption that your stakeholder will use their cell phone when they're out and about to get where they need to go. The website is the second most preferred way to receive these communications at 43%. So right now, email is 94%, and the website is 43%. Stakeholders want to receive information from schools, staff, and districts. weekly from the schools, teachers and staff weekly, and then from the district monthly. So in speaking with Kathy and Beth, really getting a district newsletter email out on a regular basis is definitely a goal for the future. So stakeholders, when they visit the website, it's 1 to 3 times every 4 months, that was 36%. 2 to 3 times a month was 25%, and less than 1 time in 4 months or fewer, 22%. Right? So we want to find out why. So it's pretty easy as you look through this, why. They rate this website average to below average in most cases. Across information, ease, organization, quality of the design, and relevant content, 45 to 58%. Okay, so in the world of education, that is an absolute D or F, depending if you're getting extra credit. So below average ratings for ease and organization, and nowhere did the site receive an average rating. Okay, so, if I was a teacher and I was scoring this, and I'd say we've got a lot of work to do. However, with Final Site and the commitment, we can do this, right? That's the big thing, and we have to figure out how we're going to do this. So another survey will go out about website, and it'll be a deeper dive on site planning, because the most important thing in developing a website is your site plan. We know what we need to do, but the most important thing is how we're going to do it and how we're going to make sure that all of your stakeholders can service and be serviced through that website, and that it has up-to-date information. So why are they visiting? District calendar is number 1. If you go to other websites that are using Final Site, on their homepage is literally a district calendar, and you can get to all of the schools through that district calendar. So it's obvious that that's a piece of work that we'll be doing in the future. Aspen is second. District news and information, specific school news. So you might go to the district website to find out about Pine Hill or Chickering events, because you want that central source. Athletics, faculty and staff, arts and music, school board information, and then special programs. So what devices are they using? Almost 50-50, their phone or their desktop or laptop. That means we have to have a really nice, responsive website that is easy to use, in the palm of the hand, and it has to be ADA approved. Colors, sizes. If a grandparent is a guardian and he or she has an issue with vision, you need to make sure that we're servicing them properly. And then also, obviously, languages. So we're going to have to figure out what languages and translations go onto this website as well. So that's where we've landed, but more work to come on the side of research. The first thing you do is send out a relatively broad piece, and then we will dig in now to each different piece. But most important, we'll start with the website. If you can get a good website, a functioning website, a navigatable website with clarity, beautiful visuals, easy to read, easy to function, then your likelihood to have to create 1 million different emails comes down quite a bit. In the world of marketing, if your website is good, then your communications, you don't have to do as many of them, because people are going to go to that website. So that's a big goal. I know that's high on Beth's list going forward, among other things, as the new superintendent. But I'm here to service and help develop the right communication from that end. Any questions?
Keep going, Dana.
Okay. I wasn't sure if somebody was on mute or if I was like, wow, okay. All right, yeah, this is what, it's great to go last. Brand strategy and communications. So we've been working on school logos, just getting them to a crisper, high resolution for use across every channel, be it social media or the district site going forward. So with the help of Deb, we created a new apple. The apple for Chickering actually was really low res and couldn't be used very well. So if you think to the future, like merch, because kids love merch, and that's a fundraising opportunity for us. So getting that all in one place and using those logos, mindfully, be it on hats or T-shirts or coasters or coffee mugs, or I'll call Yeti and see if we can't do it with Yeti. Let's go, right? So we need to be mindful there as well on how we raise money and get kids really wearing the school merchandise and get it easy to access and ready and in the right sizes and all those things. So it starts with logos. Quite frankly, the logos are kind of in disrepair, so I've been doing some sharpshooting on each of these to make sure that they're working. Began a process for a new district logo, working with Beth specifically for the future, because what we have right now is also low resolution, and let's be honest, it's really dated. If we're going to be a contemporary and a leader in the world of equity and inclusion, and we're the first school on the East Coast to what's it called? Success. Sorry, it's the end of the day for me. Challenge, right. We're the first school, right? And I'm reading all this, and I'm writing it for the progress report, and I'm like, wow, we really have got to up our game and look, because it's the first thing people are going to see. And it needs to really marry everything that we do. So a logo is very much a speaking point for who we are when people see us, along with the success of our students, obviously. Part of that process is creating a brand guide for consistent communication and the rules of the game. Don't stretch a logo. You can't say this. When you're speaking about equity, you're going to have to use certain terminology. If we're talking pronouns in our writing, we have to be very careful there as well. So those will all be part of a style guide that aligns with the goals and objectives of the learning and teaching community. Using learnings from this survey, we'll also be evaluating other websites for best practices. I've been looking at a lot of final site sites, like West Hartford, for instance, is a beautiful site. If you get a chance, take a look at it. So easy to navigate, tells us exactly who they are. Calendar right on the front page, so it kind of addresses all of the parent needs. So we will continue to do that as we start this strategy along site development. And then working with Kathy and Beth and the rest of the team, all of the principals, assistant principals, guidance, athletics, arts, developing the first annual progress report. You can call it a scorecard, but really it's a look back at this past year to distribute to the stakeholder community. It's a 4-year summary, starting with the district. Obviously, I took some pictures of all of you guys. That will be in the progress report to just really talk about why we have 3 school committees, how they work together, and Kathy's writing a letter that really looks backwards on the success and highlights everything that's been going on. So with that, if you go to the next slide, you'll see just a sampling. I just took 2 pages. Frank had gotten me a lot of content, and I had to organize it in a way that covers everything that happened, and a lot has happened this year in the middle school and all schools for that matter. But they gave me a lot of great photos. We've had our first in-person events this year, a lot of fundraising and arts, athletic win, fine arts. So, a lot went on in middle school, but this is being done for all 4 schools. So each principal has given me information. I've worked with the PTOs from each of the schools to get some great photography. We just took photos of all of the administration group, principals, and then from the district, everybody, for future use as well, because we're looking forward. So I'm just waiting for a few, I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed on some information and data, things that we may or may not want to share with the whole community, that may not even be important for that matter. So hopefully by the end of this school year, this will go out, and this will be something that we'll do in the future. And I have to say to the school committee and to Kathy, this is a lot. This is meaningful information, and it will only get better as we move forward. So I think as this goes out to everybody, the first round, I would strongly suggest we do some research, a survey to see how it was received and what other information they'd be interested in for a future progress report summary. That's all I got. And I'm on my diet today because I will not have eaten. I might have a glass of wine though.
Well, thank you, Dana. We don't want to keep you from that glass of wine, but are there questions or comments from committee members?
I just want to quickly say, yeah, this is really exciting, and I think some of us around the table here were on the, or maybe just me, on the communications subcommittee, I want to say 3 years ago, ready to launch, not as much as what you're talking about, but the new website. We were talking with Final Site, and then March of 2020 happened and it had to be tabled. So it's just really exciting to see this getting up and going again, along with all the new things that we hadn't even gotten to yet. So thank you.
It's been enjoyable. It's fun to be able to do this for, our hometowns, right? For our kids. I want more people to see this community and move here and love it as much as we have. I've been very pleased with all of it. So I'm a happy camper, but I'm a even happier marketer because it's easy to find good content in this school system. Honestly, even when you look at rankings and other things as I'm writing all of this up, it's just really, really cool to see what's getting ready to happen. And I really have to thank Kathy and Beth for keeping it together this year because it was a hard thing. So, and it's going to be fun to talk about in this progress report as well. It will demonstrate how strong this community is. So thank you for letting me do this. It's been a lot of fun.
Colleen, did you have something?
I just wanted to say thank you as well, but also I think this is a great timing with our equity audit, and we think about how we're highlighting different types of student achievement beyond academics, and sort of maybe the traditional ones we've been highlighting. I think this is a great opportunity as we look at what we value in this community and putting that on display in a real way.
Anyone else?
I'll just say that a style guide is so important, just in helping everyone who communicates with the larger, student community and the parent community, using the right language, highlighting the things that we really want to highlight. And I think it could be useful for, maybe you'll get to this at some point, but for other groups within the schools like PTOs and CSAs, so we're all on the same page delivering the same message consistently. I think that would be really helpful.
100%.
Lots of great, exciting work. Thank you, Dana.
All right, thanks you guys. Have a fabulous evening. I really enjoyed it tonight. It was fun to watch the third graders and hear about the languages. I wish that I could get my son engaged in Spanish, but I'm happy he's doing well in English this year.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, let me finish up. I did speak last week. We had our Dover School Committee meeting, the region. We had Sherborn before this. It's getting late. But as far as safety and security goes, I originally was, talking about, what we've all witnessed in Uvalde, Texas, and felt very confident with some of the things, and still do, that we've put into place. As Kate just said, things that were started a number of years ago, put on hold, but we were able to bring that back. Look at our training. So I do want to say, you're aware that at the middle school we had a number of social media posts that were threats. And we had to react and spend more hours than I can tell you. Thank goodness for your wonderful partners, law enforcement in both Dover and Sherborn. But that being said, all I want to say is tomorrow evening, we have quickly put together a parent forum. And we need our parents as partners in so many ways in order to be able to focus on what we need to focus on, for you to have the confidence that what we're doing in the schools is a safe place for our children, for our teachers, our staff, and our school community. So tomorrow evening, again, please come. It's starting at 6:30. We're going to be doing an overview of our school safety protocols. We're going to be looking at collaboration with law enforcement, what we have for student support, understanding our codes of conduct, parental collaboration and also support for them, and social media safety tips. So we hope that you take the time and you come. We've actually got a link set up, and we've been monitoring that to make sure that that agenda answers many questions that are out there. We might not have all the answers, and we'll tell you if we don't, but we'll certainly, get that information. So you're going to be hearing from, and I'll just say one thing, we were talking just before we came over here with Principal John Smith. And we're so happy to bring some of the leaders that, I know your community has faith in. And to hear from your assistant principal, your principal, your leaders in the schools, as I said, your law enforcement. So we're going to bring a number of people together to be able to share that information. And I hope you all come. And again, how many nights have you been out this week? I understand. So that being said, I'm going to stop there. And I know we've changed. Oh, can I just say one more thing on that? I was really pleased today to have Anthony come up to me and say, you asked me to get you a proposal on looking at cameras in the perimeter all around our region. And we were looking to pilot a camera. And honestly, I had some of your school leaders saying, it's not enough. We need to have, that we have it at our elementary schools. So today I was just hot off the press, handed a proposal, immediately ran up to Dawn. We took a look at it. We're confident that it's something we can afford. It can be done this summer, and we can come back again. It's just one more thing that we'll be able to check. So again, it is really hot off the press.
Kathy, do you know, will tomorrow's forum be either live streamed or recorded for the public?
We talked about recording, and I think, obviously there's information that we as school officials or police can't share, but we do still think that there's a certain amount of information that will be shared that we don't want captured and then put out for the larger good. Because once you release it, even if it's for a short amount of time, people can capture their screen. So no, we were thinking hopefully that people could connect with their friends or neighbors who attended and perhaps do a high-level summary that goes out.
Okay.
But that was something we thought long and hard about.
Good. Okay.
And also, I think the commitment from Beth and her team going forward is we probably need to continue to do many of these. Invite parents in for education. Again, the families are the most important partners we have, because whether again, we're doing everything we can here, but many of these things are happening out of school time. So we just need to reinforce that partnership.
Well, I think we really appreciate your proactiveness in putting this together, because it's obviously an issue that is top of mind for many in our communities, and also the message, Beth, that you sent, I think it was at the end of last week, sort of inviting the whole community in to be briefed on the issue and some of the things that are being done. So thank you.
And we're trying to work very quickly, and you talk about the message. And I want to say to those of you out there, in working closely with the police, we started to identify, but as of right now, the postings were, that the last posting was not done by a Dover-Sherborn student. That doesn't mean the investigation is finalized. Again, there are some things we can share, some things we cannot. But we're doing the best we can. We're trying to identify quickly. I know there were families that led us just for the little bit of information that we have. And we'll talk, as I said, as openly as we can. But I want to make that clear, to the community, that the last posting, which was the day we were going on our 8th grade field trip here, almost 170 kids excited about what ended up being wonderful opportunities, came to, and I'm not going to say came to a halt, but we had to take a look at where we were going. It was not a Dover-Sherborn student. So I just want to be clear about that.
Are there comments, questions from committee members on the safety and security? We'll save them for tomorrow. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. That brings us to the issue of the food service increase, which is something on which action is required this evening.
Yes, hopefully that'll be brief. I'm here in.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you pack your pajamas?
I think we gave you a really good summary.
Yes.
So every 3 years we do come forward and ask for a price increase rather than doing one every year. So this is about a 2.2, 2.5 per year increase over the 3 years. So it's a quarter at the elementary, a quarter at the high school. If you wanted, I'm sure if you asked about comparisons, I did look at that. we're sort of in the top quadrant of lunch prices, but keep in mind we're a really small school district, and so we have to carry a lot of the fixed costs. So I think that there's still districts up there, the Westons in the world, that are at $3.50 and $4. So we're still in there. We're still hoping that there might be state funding next year, but we want to stay on cycle and keep us prepared in case not. So we're bringing that forward to all 3 school committees for approval tonight. No milk increase this year. That is stabilized.
All right. Are there questions? Nope. All right, so then I will go ahead and lead the vote for Dover, and then I'll turn it over to Maggie and to Amanda to do the same for the region and for Sherburne. Is there a motion from the Dover School Committee to approve the food service increase as described in your packet?
Liz Grossman, so moved.
Thanks, Liz. Second?
Right.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Maggie, sure.
Do I have a motion from the Regional School Committee to increase food prices at the middle and high school to $4, and then as the rest of it is described in the packet? Kate Potter, thank you. Do I have a second?
Mark Healy, second.
Thank you, Mark. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
All right, Amanda.
All right. Could I please have a motion from Sherburne to approve the food service increase as described in the packet? And I'm afraid Dennis and Gita had to leave. They had to drop off the Zoom, but we have enough people here.
So moved.
Thank you, Christine. 1 second. Thank you. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? All right, motion passes. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Next up is the issue of inviting a Dover, or both a Dover and a Sherburne Board of Selectmen designee to serve on the school committee negotiating team. Is there anyone who wants to give us background on this? I know it's part of our historical precedent.
Yeah, so you're up for negotiations for your educator contract, and we traditionally have brought in a selectman from each of the towns to participate with the committee. They rotate who gets to vote, so I forget if it's Dover or Sherburne, but only one of them votes when you go to ratify. But it brings to the table really sound finance information about the towns that is very supportive for both groups to have. So it was a legislation that was passed. I think this is now, I'm going to say, like the 4th time that we've had selectmen involved. So it's very beneficial to the process, and I highly recommend that we continue with that.
And Dawn, we should take a vote from each committee?
Yeah, each
Okay.
committee.
All right.
And Dawn, we're not voting to nominate anyone tonight, just
You're
to
reaching out and
to
asking,
reach out.
because they'll select who is going to.
Does the region need to vote on that, or just the 2 towns?
Yeah, in the past, I think all 3 have. They actually vote with the region.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Are there questions? All right, in that event, I'll start with Dover. Is there a motion to invite a member of the Board of Selectmen to select a select person to serve on the school committee negotiating team?
Colleen Bird.
Thanks, Colleen. Second? Thank you, Goldie. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? No? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Amanda, do you want to go with Sherburne?
Sure. Could I please have a motion from Sherburne to invite a member of the, I think it's called the Select Board in Sherburne, the Select Board, to designate a select person to serve on the school committee negotiating team.
So moved, Christine Walsh.
Thank you. Second? Thank you. Any discussion?
No.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Thank you.
Maggie?
Do I have a motion from the region to invite a member of the Dover and a member of the Sherburne Board of Select Board people to designate a select person to serve on the school committee negotiating team for the coming term?
So moved.
Thank you, Judy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Lynn. All discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
All right. This brings us to our consent agenda. We have a copy of the minutes of our April 13th and 27th, 2022 meetings, and a memo to appoint Elizabeth McCoy to the TECN Accept Board of Directors. Are there questions, comments? I had one comment on the minutes, and that is that where the Dover School Committee votes were captured, I noticed that Mark Healy's name appears twice and that my name is missing. But I believe that all votes were unanimous by all members present for the votes taken during those meetings. So if we could update the minutes just to correctly reflect the roll call, that would be great. All right, is there a motion from the Dover School Committee to approve the consent agenda as revised?
Liz Grossman, so moved.
Thanks, Liz. Second, Colleen, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? All right, motion carries unanimously. And passing it over to Maggie, I'll go back to you.
Great. Regent, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the changes to the minutes of the meeting as described by Sarah?
Mark Healy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Lynn. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
All right, Amanda.
All right, and Sherburne, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as revised?
So moved, Christine Walsh.
Thank you. And a second. Thank you. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Excellent. All right, motion passes. Thank you.
All right. And lastly, for members' information, we have a draft 2022-2023 meeting schedule. We're not going back. We're only going forward.
Did we talk about needing to add a joint meeting kind of probably in September?
Yes.
So
Yes.
people to
we'll
sort of
need to
maybe
figure that
piggyback
out.
onto one of those meetings so people can
Makes sense.
make some space.
Yeah, that does make sense. Beth, we'll have to settle on a date there. Okay. All right. So we have an executive session for school committee members coming up, not to return to open session. And this concerns purpose 2 under the open meeting law, which is contract negotiations with non-union personnel. But I think we go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Do we adjourn this meeting or do we?
No, we have
do we
to
then
poll.
first we have to poll to enter executive session? Okay.
Not to
return to open session.
Which is basically your adjournment.
Which is basically open adjourning. All right. All right. But we do have to poll to enter this executive session.
Individually.
So we will start with Dover. Is there a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of contract negotiations with non-union personnel, not to return to open session?
Liz Grossman, so moved.
Thank you, Liz. Second? Thank you, Goldie. Any discussion? All right. And then we have to do a roll call vote. So Liz.
Yes.
Goldie.
Yeah.
Colleen. Sarah Gutierrez done, yes. All right. Amanda,
All
would you
right.
lead the vote for Sherburne?
Sherburne, do I have a motion to enter into executive session for the purpose of contract negotiations with non-union personnel, not to return to open session?
So moved, Christine Walsh.
Thank you. Right, any discussion?
No.
Okay, so roll call vote, Christine,
Yes.
Kristen, and Amanda, yes.
Okay, Regent, do I have a vote can I have a motion to enter into executive session for contract negotiations with non-union personnel not to return to open session?
So moved.
Thank you, Lynn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? No. Great. Angie?
Angie Johnson, yes.
Mark?
Mark Healy, yes.
Maggie Sharon, yes. Kate?
Kate Potter, yes.
Judy? Judy Miller, yes. Lynn?
Lynn Collins, yes.
We're all set.
All right.
enter into executive session at what time is it?
We will enter into executive session at 9:42, not to return to open session.